Hello everyone, Babalisk Gaming here today. I'm here with MorecowbellGU. We're going to discuss the changes that were posted to the new balance update that's was on the PTR yesterday. These changes are possibly going to live next week, but they did have a day of testing them. They don't know for sure just yet which ones they're keeping. I imagine they're internally discussing them, but I wanted to discuss these prospective changes with you. And let you know the different things that you could expect to see if these things actually make it over to live. What do you think, just overall in general sense, Cowbell, on these changes?
Hey, Babalisk, happy to be here with you. Overall, I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan. I think that overall these changes are going to help slow the game down. I think that the game does need it at the moment, as, at least in my opinion, there are many decks that I could see being, fun and interesting and viable in the meta, but are just a little bit too slow at the moment. And I'm hoping that slowing down the two fastest decks in the format a little bit should give those decks time to, actually reach the point in the game where they can shine.
Now,
so I like these.
Now, you and I, we basically have our own kind of opinions on how the meta is developed and established, and you've kind of always felt like War was kind of strong. I've kind of felt like War was kind of balanced, and it was kind of geared more towards the free-to-play players. How do you feel about the free-to-play players, and what do you think their kind of route's going to be going from here to being competitive, competing with like the higher-end decks and trying to get their decks built out to be able to compete in the Mythic standing?
So I think, if anything, this opens up the free-to-play meta. I think that if you are to consider that before, the free-to-play meta was essentially either you play War or you play Nature, and you just abuse the fact that they have very powerful stats on their creatures and strong god powers, and just get by that way. But it's going to take a little bit more thought and effort to get by as a free-to-play player now. I don't think you'll be able to just stick in a bunch of efficient stat line creatures and do as well. Mostly because Sunbloom being changed is pretty big for that, as well as Finian, is that was often a card that you would see that would be like the one non-free-to-play player card in their deck. That would be like a chase card for people to get. But I think that this is going to enable things like Light Zoo. It's going to enable things like Theft and Mid-Range Deception. Decks that are all actually pretty viable free-to-play. I really like Vault Vagabond. I think it's a crazy strong card, and I would like to see more Deception decks run with it. So, who knows? That's my hope, at least. I'm hoping that we'll see more of a diverse free-to-play meta.
Yeah, and I kind of agree that it's going to change the meta heavily, especially with some of the changes they've made to some of the cards we're going to go over here in a minute. There's going to be a couple new archetypes coming out if these changes stick on some of these talismans and other cards. But let's dive into the changes here. We're going to start with the buffs, just going top down. We see a god power getting buffed here in Clear Mind. It was formerly one crystal for C1. I think at one point in its lifespan, it was like 1 crystal or 3 crystal for C2, give your god protected. And when it was in that variant, it was played heavily. And I've heard a couple people speculate over the last 24 hours that giving it 4C2 might make it viable as a god power. What do you think about that?
I definitely think it's viable. Even with the 4C1, really the issue with the Mage God power is that when you give up Mage Bolt, you give up a pretty big tool, which is the ability to break ward before using another spell, which can be really important if you're trying to kill something like a Spellsword Oni or a Polyhymnia. Polyhymnia is probably the biggest example of this. If you take away Mage Bolt, then you make it so that you can't just Mage Bolt the Polyhymnia and then hit it with a Ratify. It means that you now need 2 cards instead of just 1 to deal with a Polyhymnia permanently as mage. And that's a pretty big deal, and that plays out in a bunch of different instances throughout the game if you don't take Mage Bolt. So you really need to get something good in exchange for that. And 4C2 is pretty amazing. Being able to filter your deck that effectively, I think that we might see Combo Mage or Control Mage being seen much more now. As 4C2 is very powerful for finding the tools you need to actually win and control the game. And something that people forget about with 4C a lot of the time is that in this game, there are not that many methods of shuffling your deck or that cause your deck to be shuffled. So as such, it's entirely possible to keep foreseeing things to the bottom of your deck and essentially stack your deck in a manner that at a certain point, your deck is going to be completely known to you as far as what exactly is on the bottom of your deck and what's coming up next. So that's incredibly powerful for a control deck to basically be able to determine their own future, quote unquote. So I really like this change.
I think it's definitely a step in the right direction for that God Power. I have never seen someone pick it before now, at least in the 4C1 variant. And I feel like you said, 4C2 gives you a lot of dig power. It's definitely something I could see the return of like ramp magic kind of splashing in there. Having more reliable ramp sources, as we'll see here in the next card, in the first card we review here. It's gonna give it more longevity of I've got all my ramp stuff at the early game. Now I've got to get to my heavy hitters that are going to actually pull me back into the game and then swing the game completely into my favor. Versus, you ended up in half your deck of being ramp and never seeing it, and 4C1 just kind of felt too slow to kind of help you with that. And Mage Bolt's not going to do you a whole lot when your whole game plan is to ignore playing a bunch of like burn spells and stuff. And instead you're just trying to rush to like 7 mana, 8 mana, 9 mana and just play game-ending spells before your opponent can.
Yeah, I think that we might see it as a flex pick for certain matchups, similar to how in some matchups some people who are running Sleep Deception are picking Orchid's Distraction as opposed to Flip in that matchup, just for the reason that in particular the war matchup, you almost often just don't have enough time to ever be flipping, and you just need to get a on the board effect out of the God Power each time, and Orchid's Distraction tends to do that a little better. So I could see this essentially being the reverse thing, whereas if the mage player does not need board removal, but does need to find their combo quickly, and I could see this being good versus board wipe death. I could see this being good versus sleep deception. Anything that wants to control your hand, that wants to interrupt your plan or force you to put your plan out inefficiently, like board wipe death does. I can see this being a very, very powerful pick, because that means that a mage deck that is versus board wipe death can filter out cards that they don't want to draw into their hand, so that they don't mill out anything important. They can purposely put things that are very important on the bottom of their deck so that they know it's going to be there, and they know they're not going to mill it out until they reach that card in the deck. It's quite powerful in the control versus control matchup, I think.
Yeah, I agree. What do you think about Crystal Watcher? I mean, that's kind of a huge buff to that card that was otherwise unplayable. They're changing its mana cost from 4 to 3. The card was previously 4 mana, 2/3, had Order 10, and then the ability on it was deal 1 damage to the creature and unlock a mana crystal. What do you think about that?
This is... I'm not sure about this one. I feel like this could be pretty strong. 3 health is pretty hard to kill with a high efficiency spell, something like Ancient's Text, Illuminate, Stone Skin Poison, Nightmare, etc.
And of course, Order 10 means you can't combat it out.
Yeah, exactly. You can't just attack it. So it's pretty well defended on its own, just from its stats and numbers. And so like a 3-drop 2/3 is not the worst thing in the world, and its ability is actually kind of amazing. I could see this seeing a lot of play now.
I mean, I think that
I'll
this is a card that brings ramp magic back in. I mean, not like ramp magic was like impossible to play before because it was obviously an archetype to begin with. But I feel like this card gives it a lot of boost. Uh, kind of vision this here. You know, turn 2 you coin and play this bad boy. Turn 3 you activate it. You either play Sip or Mana Toad. You know, turn 4 you're on your 5.5 lock already, and your opponent's still
Yeah,
on
I mean,
4.
this is
You can
you're
coin
right.
you
This
can
is
coin a 6-drop out on turn 4, and your opponent is still far from that. Alternatively, if you don't want to coin a 6-drop out, you could play a Well of Power, which gives your God Protected, draws a card, and a mana lock. Or you can play a 3/3 remove a mana lock, which is Crystallix. And you know, by turn 5, you're now at 6.6. You're literally an unlock away from doing a 7-drop. By turn 5.5, you're dropping 7 drops, and God forbid you get some kind of amazing hand that you have 2 of these Crystal Watchers in, and you coin one out turn 2, turn 3, you just naturally play the other copy of it. Sure, you're gonna have a lot of like board presence you're behind on, but then you can play cards like Inferno reliably, because I mean it snowballs from there. You're at 5, you're playing a 7-drop with double Crystal Watcher hand, provided you play one turn 2 and play one turn 3. And it's a little bit scary that we think about seven mana and you've only got 5. That's powerful. You're gonna hit 9 by the time I hit 6.
Yeah, it really does provide some pretty crazy ramp. I think one of the big reasons it wasn't seen before was just because it's at 4 cost. And ramping tends to have the most effect before 5 because of the way that mana works in this game. But being able to put it out at 3 means that even if you weren't crystalling it, then on turn 4 you will be able to get 1 ahead. That gets you closer to your board wipe. I think that this could definitely see a lot of play, because I think that this would enable people to get to higher cost spells easier and with less issue, because this is a single card that can keep ramping you. I mean, you're right. This is definitely one of those cards where I don't know if I'd replace Sip of Elixir for it, but I would definitely throw 2 of these in a Ramp Magic deck now.
I think if you're playing Ramp Magic with this card, you kind of circumvent a lot of your early removal. Like you cut some of your tracking. Maybe you play Tracking Bolt still, but you cut like your Illuminates, your Form of Powers, your Ancient Texts. I mean, those are all great cards, but like it's a different deck than what you're playing. And then you can afford to run 2 of the what is that 5 mana deal 2 damage to all enemy creatures. I can't think of the top of my head.
Rain.
So you play Crystal Rain. You could play Inferno. You can play. I can't think of the 6 damage and then do 1 to everything else.
Asterisk Implosion.
Yep, Asterisk Implosion. You just get all these options. You can play the Flame Breath Dragon at 8 mana that deals 5 to everything. So you can pretty heavily interact with your opponent as a ramp strategy as is. And then there's also the inevitable, just play a Polyhymnia in the deck, and
I want to see Avatar of Magic become a thing.
Turn everything into 1/1 rats.
No, not that. That's Magic Unburned. Avatar of Magic is it's a 9-drop that has Protect and Ward, and it's a 9/9. And whenever you cast a spell, you get a copy of Beam in your hand that costs 1, and the Avatar also gives spell boost +2. So you can do some. If you can ramp that out quickly and like reduce the cost of a little bit, it's possible to just combo kill someone in literally a single turn. Like you can just drop the Avatar. Like if you've reduced it by, I mean, let me think here. So Beam is 3 damage. You get +2 from the Avatar, so that's 5. So you would need 6 spells to cast, like to just straight up finish them. From that at least. But so yeah, I mean, if you were able to get down to like use like alchemists or warp engineers or whatever, and just keep reducing the cost of the avatar, and then pull like a couple small spells in hand, you would easily be able to just finish them in a single turn. It is definitely possible to use a bunch of like warp engineers and whatever to reduce it down to 4 cost, if not lower.
Yeah, I definitely agree that this card's super playable, and it might be enough to bring Ramp Magic, back to the fold of being something competitive, especially considering the war nerfs. We'll go over here in a minute. I think that's gonna, with the format overall slowing down, is gonna help solidify its return. But I also think that this card will now, enable it to return. What do you think about the Phalanx Lieutenant? Buff. I heard a lot of speculation the moment it was spoiled. People are calling it the new Guild Enforcer. What are your thoughts on that? Of course, it was a 4/1 armor 2. It's now becoming a 5/3 armor 2 at 5. Both neutral creatures still.
I have to see what they're going to do to armor really to make this determination, because I still think they're going to change the armor system, because I do think that at the moment the armor system is a little bit it's not balanced, I'd say, but it's just there's sometimes it's an axis you just can't interact on. And what I mean by that is if you are playing for example, zombie death, you obviously have destroy spells and whatnot. That can just kill the Guild Enforcer and remove it from the board. But you often otherwise just have a bunch of like 2 power, 1 power creatures or whatever that just aren't able to actually damage the Guild Enforcer. And this becomes more egregious when the armor increases. When you have something that has 4 armor, it's possible your entire board can't even damage it at all. And that's why I think it would be a good idea to make it so that each hit reduces armor by 1, even if it doesn't deal damage, so that wider boards can actually deal with a Guild Enforcer, even if it's less efficiently. They can just deal with it by, slamming a bunch of things into it to reduce its armor and then attacking with other stuff.
Yeah.
Which still makes armor pretty defensive, and I think you could maybe increase the armor numbers if you had to in certain cards, but it still makes it so that armor has a little bit more counterplay while fulfilling a similar role.
Yeah, I kind of agree in the aspect of, armor needs some kind of change in that aspect. It feels really disgusting to have a Polyhymnia resolve on you as nature, and you kind of just have lost the game. There's very little you can do. Just because that one card is so busted against, your whole domain. Like, there's a total of 2 cards that can even interact with it, beyond just having disgustingly large creatures.
Yeah, and that's true. It shouldn't be that if you have an 8/8 out in the field, then you could kill the Polyhymnia. But if you have, 6 3/3s, you can't do anything to it, because that's currently how it is now.
Yeah. And I mean, even having like 3 8/8s, it's kind of a toss up that you'll even be able to kill the Polyhymnia. I mean, it's pretty close that you could, but how often are you going to have 3 8/8s?
Damage at least. You're able to go through the armor.
Yeah.
And that's even breaking the protected, you have to be able to bust through the armor first, which is armor is very strong in the state right now.
But I think in the aspect of Phalanx Lieutenant here specifically, I think he's missing one key thing that would make him as good as Guild Enforcer, and that's frontline. Because
just not frontline.
The thing that made Guild Enforcer so busted when it first was out was it was an armor 2 3/5 or 3/4, and it had frontline, so you had to deal with it before you could resume your plan of going face. And a lot of the aggressive decks, like the aggressive war decks and like the regen nature, like their creatures weren't big enough to just get over that hill, so it kind of stopped their whole game plan. If you were playing zombies literally couldn't get over that mountain. It was just too big, and at 5 mana, it was insane. So I think this card as a whole may not be as playable as Guild Enforcer is.
No, I agree. It's because for one is less health overall, even than the old Guild Enforcer, which had 4 health, 2 armor, and you're right. It doesn't have frontline, so it's gonna be. It's a 5-drop, and it's gonna be a big threat. I think.
It
I
just
think it's gonna be
compete.
the kind of thing that is
It
like
competes
you
with
could
so
put
many
on the
things.
field.
It just competes with so many things. I mean,
Yeah, it does just take like the 5-drop slot is just sort of important for a lot of decks.
you've got like the closest card I could probably match it up with is Helios Battlesworn, which is a neutral 5/6 for 5 mana, and that card rarely gets played after you get past like the gold meta or like the gold elo. Like War is going to be playing its Orcish elites. Nature will probably start picking up
It's
Veil Wardens if it's
there's
not playing the Moose.
yeah, Moose is a 6-drop as well. And I mean, you look at the stats. It's a 6/6 versus a 5/3.
I mean,
So
Mage already has Snowstorm Spire, which it's not playing in the 5-drop. 4 drops, there's Wetlands Ogre, which is marginally just one strength off of this card. And of course, you're still competing with the good old Guild Enforcer, that's a 3/5 armor 1. I mean, having frontline on that card makes that card more playable than the Phalanx Attendant, I feel.
I mean, I think if you were able to give this card frontline reliably, then it could be decent. And the only god I can think of that really is able to do that in a somewhat reliable manner is Light. Light actually can do it in a reliable manner. They have a card that gives something frontline, but Mage can do it somewhat reliably if they're running Rune Mage, because then they can try to go for the Rune of Strength. But that's still pretty RNG. It just also seems like that's already a 2-card combo for what you could be running. I mean, if you're in Nature, you can be running Snapping Turtle and some other means of giving it frontline. If you're going to be trying to do that anyway.
Yeah, I just think Nature already has way better creatures that they would be playing, so it's just hard to imagine them wanting to play this.
I mean, if you're trying to do that anyway, why not just put down a single frontline and throw Aspect of Pangolin of it, right?
Yep.
That's just much easier to get like onto a good front line, like a good statted front line, because you can put down like a Pyramid Warden or something, and then just throw an Aspect of the Pangolin on top of it, and then boom, saying he has Pyramid Warden.
What do you think about the Inspiring Scald change? So Inspiring Scald's a 2-mana war card. It's a 2/3 with a roar. If you're frenzied, give Twin Strike to your weakest creature in your hand. They're changing it to your strongest creature.
Give me a second, just looking it up here.
So essentially, Inspiring Scald's now gonna be able, like, you're gonna have a lot more control over what creature is gonna get the Twin Strike, and debatably having Twin Strike on your strongest creature is better than your weakest creature, because your weakest creature is probably gonna run into the first thing and die. I mean, you're thinking like Tavern Brawlers, Vanguard Axewomans, stuff like that in the deck that would be running this.
I mean, this is better for sure. I mean, this is better for sure. Like, so I can give you one example that I can just think of it being flat better off the top of my head, where something else would be worse. Let's say you have an Archangel Bruiser in hand, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have a what is that? That Viking. Check the 2/2. The 2/2 blitz.
That is that's Viking Axewoman.
Yeah, Viking Axewoman. And you have a Viking Axewoman in hand, or a Tavern Brawler. One of the 2 strength blitz things. If you are frenzy, like you have some board presence, and you are able to attack there, you could drop that out, and in the past that would give you, that would give it to your Viking Axewoman or your Tavern Brawler to make them 3 strength, which is, or not 3 strength, it would make them, Twin Strike, which means that they can potentially put out 4 damage that turn, which is pretty damn good, of course. But now that puts it on the Archangel Bruiser, so that means that you can potentially put out 10 damage that turn. So it's an increase of 5 instead of 2.
Yeah, especially
the higher the higher strength creature you have in your hand, essentially, for usage with that, like if you built your deck that way, the better that becomes. So you can run it with, like even with the new Archangel Bruiser, if you can hit something that only has 1 strength, or somehow give it 1 more HP, then you could swing again and then potentially do 10 overkill damage total, which is just kind of a crazy amount for 4 mana.
Yeah, I mean, considering the fact that if you're frenzying to get the Twin Strike, you're already going to have the overkill from the Archangel Bruiser coming down.
Well, not just that, but if you think about it, this doesn't wear off at the end of the turn. So you can prepare this in the future, because this is only a 2-drop. So you can, if you have an Archangel Bruiser hand or something, you drop that early. That makes the Archangel Bruiser for when the Archangel Bruiser stronger for when it comes out, stuff like that, etc. You can use that to basically prepare like a Twin Strike, almost like a makeshift Orcish Bruiser in hand.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be interesting to see if this card gets played now. It very well could. I definitely think this next card's going to get played, the Caged Berserker. They dropped it from a 5 to a 4 mana. It is a 5 mana 1/1 currently. At the end of your turn, if you're frenzied, and this card is in your hand, give it +2/+2. All they did was drop the mana once. Theoretically, though, War starts putting damage down as early as turn 2. So you're talking like turn 2, turn 3. I mean, if you want to coin out, your Slayer power on turn 1, and then play something turn 2 to interact, you can. But I feel like this card got a bit of an upgrade by just dropping the mana down by 1. I definitely don't think it's anywhere near the Crystal Watcher buff, though, just to be clear. What do you think on that?
So correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't Caged Berserker nerfed already at some point?
I don't recall seeing that, but it's very possible.
Let me check the price history here, because I feel like it was. Yeah, I mean, when it first came out, it's expensive, but it might not have been. I might be thinking of Rolling Thunder.
Rolling Thunder was definitely nerfed.
Yeah, I know that one was definitely nerfed. So my opinions on the card are this: that you're probably not going to see it being played, because the problem is it sort of violates the. Maybe in like a control war list, I could see this being pretty good. But in an aggro war list, you sort of need to be of the mindset of whenever you put something down, it's going to be efficient. And that's the problem with this, is that if you have it in your hand at the start of the game, it's a card you just can't play. I mean, even if you were able to play it, it's just not going to be efficient until you've been frenzied for a few turns.
That's a fair thought. Yeah, I didn't really consider you do have to hold this as a dead card from the beginning.
Yeah, you have to hold it.
That changes the thought process on it entirely.
Yeah, and it means that War can't just vomit their hand down onto the board as easily, because they need to, keep that in hand. If they pull another one, all of a sudden they've got to keep 2 in hand and decide when they put 1 down, get effect from it. So it's one of those cards that definitely would pay off later, but the problem is that if War takes you later and they're not playing a control list, they're usually going to lose. They're not really meant for that. They're meant for low to the ground, just straight to the face attacking. And
yeah, I mean, there's Slayer power.
It doesn't have blitz. It doesn't have any other stat line. It's just a beef. That's the thing.
Yeah.
So it's also vulnerable, and that's a little. I don't see that being run, just because I don't see War players running things that don't have blitz or enable their blitz creatures, really, because of just how powerful blitz is currently.
So do you think giving it blitz would make it playable, or do you think that they should just change it so...
Oh, I think giving it blitz would absolutely make it playable.
What if you
make it like a fantastic removal?
But what do you think about, instead of making it, if it's in your opening hand, that it's in your deck, so that it counts every time that you damage them in the game, it gets buffed in your deck?
That would be ridiculous. That would be basically you just every single game remove, you get to see them landing a 10/10 plus blitz creature.
No, not with blitz. Not with. It doesn't get both. It can't have both. Having both is a little dangerous.
If it didn't have blitz, I think that would be a little bit better. I think if it was in your, if it just had to be in your deck, that might be a little better. In
Yeah,
that case, I would. I don't know if that would be too complex, but maybe give it like have it be like +1/+1 if it's in deck, +2/+2 if it's in hand, something like that.
yeah, I think that could probably work.
Yeah. So I
Okay.
mean, that means that like there's still like you can't just throw it back in your deck and that always be the right choice, but like it gives some sort of play lines to think about with the card. So I like that at least.
All right. Well, that brings us to the next card that I'm actually really excited about. I know you're really excited about Counterfeit.
Oh yeah.
Oh boy, that change. That change. One simple, small little addition to that card made it super playable from being a meme. So Counterfeit is a 2-mana deception card. It says if your opponent has a relic equipped and you don't equip a copy of your opponent's relic, otherwise draw a card. The new version destroys your opponent's relic and equips a copy of it. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, wow, what do I think? As it was, this card, you're right. It was a meme card. You ran it because you wanted to copy someone's Necroceptor or whatever, and then start playing Zombie Death. It was a meme. Like it didn't really contribute a lot in a bunch of matchups. I mean, it could cantrip, like you could just draw a card with it, but versus War, especially, getting their relic was pretty much just pointless because, I mean, yeah, sure, you could attack one of their creatures with it or attack.
But then you're furthering their game plan of hurting
you.
Yeah,
you're hitting one of their creatures, which is, I mean, you're just giving them a free attack to the face essentially because you don't care about removing their creatures with your face damage. You care about your life total. I mean, unless you're an aggro deck, being able to attack with a weapon and trade life for creatures is just not as advantageous. But now that it destroys it and equips a copy of it, this is far better. This is because this is not durability. This is unconditional, flat, destroy your 99 durability Kopesh destroy.
It answers so many things in the format. Off the top of my head, the most important ones are probably like Palace Wand, which in your control matchup or even just burn matchup against Mage, you cut off the card advantage. You can,
you get your own. You steal your own.
But I mean, you're not going to get advantage out of it because you're not playing Mage cards in your deck. But you can,
that's true,
you can just tap it immediately to draw a card. You can take the Necroceptor that's causing you a headache.
I wonder if that would make Thievery a better power choice. There's actually a card that lets you delve for a common god power. So I could see that being like a decent one-up if you need to. It might be a little too
wonky.
Just, it might be asking a little bit.
I just think
too much for the stars to align, but like because there are a lot of those relics like that.
I mean,
like Kopesh and
if Counterfeit Red destroy your opponent's relic, draw a card, it would be played still. I feel
that would maybe be even like more reliable. But I think that this is a game-winning card as it is. I think that this is a card that you could put into a deck that, like, this makes running Kopesh a risk.
This also, yeah, Kopesh is one I hadn't even thought about. It really hedges that board wipe death matchup with that. I was thinking more of the shield from War. Turn one they coin out the shield so they're ready for the next turn.
Oh yeah. You just counterfeit it.
Yep. I definitely feel like that gives Deception what they were missing. Like, you no longer have to play the Iron Tooth Goblin or the 4/4 break a relic or do 2 damage to the relic and then also wake a creature up. You don't have to play any of these wonky cards or rely on the Sanctum as Deception and control anymore. You actually can just smash it and you get a copy. I think the important part is in the zombie matchup. A lot of people don't they underestimate the corpse explosion damage. A lot of people don't realize if you have an open field and you let an open field of zombies sit, you're kind of lining yourself up to take 24 points all in one turn. So having the ability to break that scepter makes all your rapture dances and whatnot a little bit better.
I mean, not just break it, but
you get it. So you get the life link, the life leech.
That's a life game method versus versus death is just fantastic versus an aggro deck like that. If you steal, the avatar's weapon, like that's another additional just 5 life for you. You can get like pretty much guaranteed get that one as well, and that takes off 5 damage off the board on war, like for control war. You could take their tenderizer if that's what they're running. Like this really helps with a lot of strong relic war decks, which definitely is currently the hardest thing for Deception to deal with, because Deception
You can't even interact with it because
you just can't interact with it really. I mean, unless you're running relic destruction creatures, which the deck of at least Sleep Deception is a little too tight to be running that. Unless you're running those kinds of creatures, then yeah, I mean, you're basically just waiting to get smacked in the face, because there's not a lot of heals available, so they're interacting directly with your life total, and there's just not a lot you can really do about it as it is. But this being a cantripable relic removal card that also, steals the relic, I think that this is going to see a lot of play.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So let's move to the next card, Covetous Cutthroat. So it was a 4-mana neutral 3/3. At the end of your turn, give +X to the creature where X is the durability of your opponent's relic. They're changing its stats from 3/3 to a 4/4, so it's now 4-mana 4/4 neutral. How do you feel about that card? I feel like it's still not going to be played.
Yeah, I don't see it being played either. I mean, I'm not sure what role it fits. It's just too expensive for, like an anti-war card or whatever. And I mean, I could see it being decent against something like zombies, I suppose. But the problem is Death has a lot of destroy anyway.
Yeah, I mean, disintegrating it, you just have all these options to spot remove like a problematic card. They're just going to probably stack like 8 zombies on it and call it a day.
Like, it's cool to think about it being, like a 4-drop that then turns into a 5/5 and to a 6/6, etc. But when does it happen? It happens at the end of your turn, so it will at least have the effect of 1 turn. But unless you're playing it into like, a massive Kopesh or something, then you're not going to get like a huge amount of effect of it immediately or for very long, because they're going to just burn the relic eventually. If like if they see that out, they're not going to just keep their relic there to or keep the creature there to let it keep getting bigger.
Yeah, I think the only like relics that really stand out, are like Lysander's Spear, Orpheo's Mask, Palace's Wand. Like it'd be good against those where they're incentivized to keep them high.
You're not trying to destroy it.
But I just feel like it's not going to be that great.
It's 4 mana, and 4 mana is a lot. Like
4 mana is where a lot of the gods get really powerful cards. Like Nature would never run this. Deception probably would never run this. Light would never run this because it's outside of its characteristics. War would never run this. Mage, I feel like, would never run this. Like, it's just finding a home for this is nearly impossible. So I think they're going to have to go back to the drawing board on that card.
So one thing I'll say about the Covetous Cutthroat, I think that if you were to make it a lower cost creature, and have it read something like, at the end of your turn, remove 1 durability from your opponent's relic and give +1/+1 to this creature. Or give
that's
armor or something. I think that would be
completely changing the design, though. I mean, I could be behind that change, like make it a 3 or a 4-mana 3/3. At the end of your turn, take 1 off your opponent's durability. That could be balanced. I could get behind that change. But I don't think you make it a bigger creature or you make it cheaper. I just think that, like, if you're going to have a recurring nerf to your opponent's relics, you got to keep it around that 4 to 5 range.
I feel like if it starts off a little weaker, like maybe if it's
like a 3-mana 2/2 or something like that.
Yeah, I think if it was a 3-mana 2/2 with that effect, I think that would be balanced.
And it basically consumed 1 durability from your opponent's relic to get +X/+X.
Yeah, so, and that gives, the opponent some counterplay to remove it. I mean, you think about how much the Bronze Servant removes your 3. It removes 3, and it gives you a 2/4 on the board. So you would need to, I mean, that would be about as efficient, at least stat-wise, because it would become a 3/3 on the end of your turn. It would remove one, and then it could potentially become more stat efficient. But you would need to keep it alive for those turns for it to actually, get that effect. I think it would be a cool card.
Yeah, I think that'd probably be a solid change for it. So let's look at this last card here on the buff list, Nubian Redeemer. I know we know somebody in our Discord that's really excited for this. I'm not particularly super hyped about it, but it's not like something I'm disappointed in either. So it's a 5-mana light card. It's a 4/5. Once per turn, give +1/+1 to this creature when one of your creatures dies. I think it's neat that it's once per turn, so that means if your opponent kills something on their turn, it'll get another +1/+1, but I just don't think that it really fits the 5 slot for light and what light wants to be doing. How do you feel about that?
It
is in the Nubian, so that wonky light Nubian deck that somewhere exists might want it, but
yeah, I mean, it is in a Nubian. And I mean, there are a lot of Nubian decks that do want to just have creatures dying and coming back and whatnot. So I could see this being pretty strong with the Afterlife deck, actually, because there are decks that basically the goal is to have creatures that when you kill them, they come back, or something else. They bring you like a new creature back. You run things like the Tomb Guard that spawn, like there's a front line that spawns front lines when it dies, and you could use this to become like a mass. Like it could become a very large threat very quickly. If you could protect it, which is light is not the hardest thing in the world. Like you have things that give stuff ward, and you have things that give stuff protected. I think that this could actually be pretty good. I think that if you ran this with stuff like the Etheric Alarm or the Golden Harp, things that summon a bunch of like low cost defenders early on, this. I mean, could you imagine this with the Etheric Alarm? Essentially, like if you had that out and you were able to put this card out like a turn after that or so. The Etheric Alarm summons, just for anyone listening, it summons a 0/2 with frontline, like a 0/2 Atlantean with frontline. Anytime an enemy summons a creature, and it is a light relic that is a 3-drop with 5 durability. And at the start of your turn, it goes down in durability by 1. So it's essentially a very powerful stalling tool. As long as you have that relic up, anytime they play a creature, you get a creature as well. If you combine it with something like that, I think it could be pretty crazy because, if they can't get to it and kill it in time, and their method of killing things are all based around damage, like nature, for example, then it's going to get to a point where it's just going to be too hard to kill. It's going to be gaining, like 2 health in a turn, essentially, and then you can use. This might be a good start to seeing more Voltron style strategies reemerge in light, where they try to just buff up one big creature and protect it, as opposed to doing like a bunch of small ones and buffing them up like Zoo does.
I just feel like Light's generalized plan that they're pushing. I mean, if you look at the core set refresh that they've kind of got spoiled that they're working on, a lot of the changes are really pushing for Light to be 2x. A lot of the changes are like if your base power and toughness is like 2x, do this, do that. And I feel like it's pushing a separate strategy for Light, which from a design standpoint is not bad. It gives people versatility in the wheel. But I just feel like there's not a lot of support for the Redeemer to really matter for this change to make it see more play.
Yeah, I mean, I would say one thing is that the stats that it has, it's just not that easily protectable. I mean, 4/6 is nice. Like it does dodge a lot of removals, but I mean, it doesn't dodge Lightning Strike.
It just doesn't. I think that the bottom line for it is it doesn't impact the board at 5 mana. The turn it comes out.
It's
and
just
that
expensive.
Hurts. I mean,
I think that if you were trying to make a card like this, I think the better way to do it would be to have it be low cost.
Well, I just want to point out, like in the 5-drop hole for Light already, they have Goldwing Sphinx, and that card, it's frontline, gives your God protected, so that sticks. And then if they get through that front line, it protects all your creatures for the turn. So it kind of makes combat a headache on getting past it because you're going to have protected, which means they've got to fog a damage point onto you after getting that Sphinx down. But also your creatures are super durable, for the turn it died. So, like, I just don't see why they would want to play the Redeemer unless they are specifically on, like you were saying, that Afterlife deck.
What I would say about that card, about the Redeemer overall as a card, the mana cost it has makes it awkward for its effect. I think that is the biggest problem with that card, because even if it was just super overstated, it feels like you to get effective effect from that card, you want to play it before other creatures die, right? But the thing is,
things have already been trading by 5.
It's a 5 cost, so it's not something that lands on the board and then is just like, you're right. It doesn't do anything when it lands. It's something that needs to build, but it's at a turn
I feel like
is pretty late in the game already.
I feel like if they went 3/4 for 4 mana with it instead of 4/6 for 5 mana with it, it would probably be playable more. Even if they went 2/5,
I'd honestly just make it like a 0/2 or something for like 2 mana or something to that effect, something like that, or maybe not for 2, maybe like 0/2 for 1 or something like that. But
you got to think though, Light already has the Empyrean that it competes with in that slot, and then you've got Blind Martyrs already. You can't give them too many more 0 drops that you have to build up, because it kind of,
that's true.
It inundates that kind of option to them.
Possibly a 3-drop then, but I mean, it does just feel like at 5, it's definitely a little too awkward.
Well, let's move to everybody's favorite subject, the subject of the night that probably got the most attention, and that's the nerfs. So the first nerf on the list here, I definitely saw Warrior losing Soul Survivor is like a really strong card. I didn't expect quite as heavy of a hand to come down on War. I know you were expecting it, and that comes from our differing visions on the meta. So the first card here is Archangel Bruiser. The card's a 5/3. Was it a 4-drop, 5-drop? I think it's a 4-drop.
4-drop.
Yeah, 5/3, 4-drop. It's got Blitz. If you've got Frenzied, it gets overkilled. Their change to it is they're dropping the health from 3 to 2, and I feel like that's a fair play, because it kind of feels a little disgusting when you're running over when you frenzy off of a creature you have on the battlefield, like a Tavern Brawler that survived or a Warmonger Smith, and then you turn around, you eat their Wild Hog, or you eat their Marshwalker, and then you turn around and eat something else with the card. As opposed to having to take 2 turns to get 2 kills. You just straight up get 2 kills, and you've overkilled on both of them. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, after thinking about it a bit, I would say that there are definitely a lot more 2-strength creatures than there are 3-strength creatures in the game. And I mean, like things like Skeleton Heavy, Warmonger Smith, things along those stat lines, they're all 2/4s. And yeah, you're right. It kind of, what really sucks, especially, is when they slam it into your creatures and then, take out a bunch of them with the overkill effect, and then use Out of Its Misery on the surviving Archangel Bruiser. That always just felt terrible, because I mean, it does give so much effect on entering. Like, I almost feel like you could play this creature and if it had 1 health, and it would still be kind of crazy. Just because, like, the role of it is not really to be a body on the board. I feel it is to
move people out of the way.
Basically, just I mean, it's basically a little bomb that you just slam into them and blow a little hole in their defenses. Like, that's how you use it. You don't really use it to like build up your own board. You're just using it almost as the saboteur that just explodes in, and you're expecting it to die, but it's gonna take out some stuff. It's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt the enemy board for sure because of the overkill. So I do think that should help a little bit, because it's staying on the board is basically just gravy at that point. And I mean, if you can't kill it, then it's 5 damage a turn, and if they out of its misery it, then they just basically get even more value and pull like another one +3/+3 or something crazy.
Yeah, out of all of the changes that were listed in the last 24 hours, I don't think I've seen a single person complain about the Archangel Bruiser debuff. I think everybody inherently knew that card was a problem.
Yeah, I feel like people sort of understood that because like that card you run in every war deck, control and aggro, in every list, just because of how useful the effects that it gives are, just like because of the inherent wording on it, like the blitz overkill. So giving it like really good stats, especially being able to like survive after attack, is probably not the best idea. So I think this is a good change.
How about that Soul Survivor change, though? We knew it was coming. We all knew it was coming. I still saw a few people today. I still saw a few people today that were upset by it and startled by it, but I think we all saw it coming. That card's been problematic. It was too weak as a 7-drop, so they dropped it to a 6-drop. As a 6-drop, though, it literally enabled War to play a 1-drop off a coin. So play a 1-drop, coin back up to 6 mana, and then literally wipe the board no matter what you really had going on. I mean, Leviathan Hunter killed, X7s, killed X5s with 2 armor. It made it really hard to deal with, especially if they had a protected creature the prior turn, because you could spend your turn if you had been trading with it, breaking the protected, but you just couldn't deal with it if you couldn't have 2 ways to interact with one creature in one turn. And then also that prior play I was discussing, like, there's 0 interaction with it. It's literally destroying your whole field. It may as well be Apocalypse Now for how good it is.
I mean, so with a spell like this, I like to consider sort of like a best case, worst case kind of scenario, and as well as like what is the best case a war player can pull off if you had counterplayed them as well as you possibly could. And in this situation, the counterplay is keep it so they won't have creatures on the board, so they can't just Soul Survivor. They would need to play a creature first. And if you think about that, and you think about them using something like a knock the Berserk or whatever, like the 3/1 1-drop. If they were to drop that and then use Soul Survivor on it, that would currently do 8 to everything, which is a lot. That's kind of a crazy amount of damage for sure.
There's just not much that really survives it, especially in the early game. Nothing really survives in the early game. That kills the green giant, that 6-drop the nature drops that has overkill. That kills that too. It's ridiculous.
It kills like almost everything.
And the worst part is, like,
I just hope this is enough, because this still does 6 damage, but it's for 7.
I think it's a little more. I feel like still it's a little more reasonable now. For those that don't know,
more reasonable for sure. Because I mean, if we compare it to Inferno, Inferno does what, 5 damage to all enemy creatures?
That's 7,
for 7 for 1 card. This would do 6 damage to all creatures for 2 cards.
Yeah,
but it would also leave like a big threat on the board.
For those that don't know, Soul Survivor, it was a 7-drop down to a 6 as a spell. Gives +5 strength to one of your creatures, and it deals its strength to other creatures. They nerfed it down to a 6-drop. Sorry, they buffed it to a 6-drop, and now they are now nerfing it to give +3 strength instead of +5 strength. But back to the point on the card, I think that it's a little more reasonable now, because your Leviathan Hunters are only killing X5s, your Vanguard Axelmans are only killing X5s. Your Raid Revelers and your Audis are only killing, X6s. I think it opens up some forms of counterplay to the point where, like, nature isn't just getting obliterated from it, or light isn't just getting obliterated from it. It really felt disgusting as light to get ahead of the board presence and to keep control of the board only for them to play a 1-drop and then wipe your whole field with it off the
Yeah,
Soul Survivor.
six is a really important number for light too. Like, doesn't Asterius have 6 health?
I think it's a 4/4, no 4/6, I believe. I can check that.
Yeah, it's a 4/6. So I mean, if you can give him like just 1 more health or whatever, then that dodges the
4/6,
and
yeah.
that's like a max efficiency 7-drop Soul Survivor essentially, like the 3/1 drop into a Soul Survivor.
Well, I think the worst
part
of the Soul Survivor in the prior state was not only did you get cleaned, but now you had a threat you had to answer, and if it had protected, you're back to the drawing board of needing 2 interactions with it, and that you get a lot less time when it's like an 8x or like a.
Yeah, I mean, I'm hoping that the 2 strength is enough. I think this is more fair. I do think that with a war, every point counts, especially if they are trying to, use it to just keep the aggro going. I mean, that's really when it was the most oppressive. That basically you would take control of the board versus war. Like you would get them to a point where you should win the game, given that you have killed all their creatures. They have like maybe 1 not even on the board. They have a card or 2 in hand. They're top decking. You have a full hand. You've got like 5 creatures in the board. Something. For all purposes, maybe like your life total's at 10 or whatever, and theirs is pretty high. You should still win. But the thing is, Soul Survivor makes it so that they just put that on, like if they top deck that, they throw it on their last creature or whatever, or just use Valkas and put down a 1/1 and use it, then your board just explodes, and they all of a sudden have a threat on the board that is doing at minimum 6 damage or whatever, probably more. And I mean, you're right. Like it just really makes the game hard to turn around when they essentially have almost an anti-turnaround method where they just basically throw down that Soul Survivor, and it stops anyone's attempt at getting a board back. Like it's crazy versus something like a Demogorgon too, because if you put down Demogorgon or something, try to get back some health, they just throw down on one of the sleeping creatures, and all of a sudden your board's dead.
I definitely think it's more in
really
line.
Good.
I think it's more in line with being a 6-drop now.
Yeah.
I think having a 6x after wiping the board is going to feel a lot cleaner than having an 8x or, God forbid, like a 10x from something else. But I'll tell you what I did not see coming was a sudden blue. I kind of
like to see it be like a +1 strength and be a 5-drop, to be honest.
It's just really tough for it to kill everything with that. I mean, the point of Soul Survivor is to wipe everything.
War should be able to kill the whole board reliably, like as it does. I mean, like War has a lot of tools as it is. Like they have good healing. They have between the Carnage Sweep, the healing, it makes Control War very viable, especially with like higher cost decks and whatnot, because of the huge amount of tools they've been given.
Would you feel better about Soul Survivor if it gave the +5 or +6 strength, wiped everything, and then the creature went down to 0 strength?
I would feel much better, yeah.
I think that would be another way to balance it. So you're going to discharge that creature, you'll get the board presence back, you'll discharge that creature's ability to interact, and leave something for your opponent to pick up, but at the same time, you've just cleared the whole board. I think leaving something after you've cleared the board's it's really oppressive when your main game plan is to go face.
Yeah, and that's the thing that like most other board wipes in the game don't have that effect. So just off the top of my head, Lysander's Mercy puts all creatures in the bottom of their owner's deck, yours included.
Yeah.
Rapture Dance, you need to actually set up, and it's very easy for people to play around that, as opposed to Soul Survivor, where you essentially choose how much strength you're going to get from it. Rapture Dance, if they play 2 creatures, you're getting 2 damage from that Rapture Dance. And even when you play it for 6, it just stops the board. It just clears it, and that's it. It doesn't give you like crazy advantage. Inferno, that it does asymmetrical damage, so like it only hits the enemy board, but it still is just a bit of damage. Or like it's still just 5 damage, which is it's not that much for 7. Not to mention that again, it just doesn't do anything other than clearing the board. That's literally all it does. So it's like if I had to compare it to another board wipe, any other card in the game. There's this card actually in Deception from Genesis. Let me see here. It is Three's Company. Yeah. So not Three's Company. Three's a Crown. Three's a Crown reads, pull 2 random enemy creatures from the board into the controller's hand and summon a 3/2 golem for 6. So you can compare it sort of to that, but the thing is, Soul Survivor is like far less random, and you can put on something with a far better stat line than the golem you summon. So that's, I mean, you're right. It really is just such a powerful ability, and that's kind of why I feel like at like 5, and then like it just gives a little bit of a stat boost to it and does damage. That would be somewhat of a better design for it, because
I think inevitably,
I just feel like it shouldn't be a full board wipe if it also gives a stat boost.
Yeah.
But another option would be that if it reduced the creature's strength to 0 or something afterwards.
Yeah, I think inevitably this card has been so problematic. If they want to keep the flavor of the card, they're going to have to go back to, being a 6-mana board wipe, but also render the creature that did it useless. I mean, in flavor, if you just wiped out an entire, like, everybody around you, you're probably going to be sitting there panting.
So, what I could see being a decently balanced change for it? Something like give, +3 or +2 strength or whatever, and then deal the damage to each other creature. For each other enemy creature killed, get, like +1 strength or whatever, or for each enemy creature get -1 strength, and then for each allied creature get +1 strength. Sort of similar to how End Times works,
I actually think
it would give a lot of flavor to it.
It kind of gave me, your thought of it actually gave me the better, kind of what I feel like would be better is, what if it deals all its damage to the other creatures, but they all deal their damage back to it as well? So
there's a card like that, but it the only problem is it's like the creature goes around and attacks every other creature on the board in turn.
Yeah.
The thing is, they die after the first one if they die.
That's true. But maybe instead of making it it goes and hits them one at a time, it just happens simultaneously. So that
I could also see that. I could see that too.
It would give a little bit of variation from that card, because that card's also a warrior card. I just can't remember the name of it off the top of my head.
I really like that change, because then it gives some thought to the card too. Because then you'd have to think, like, okay, if I Soul Survivor, my Pyramid Warden or whatever, they have a total of 7 on the board, so he dies or whatever, and you can consider that, like, do you want to get like a little extra damage and put on something with higher damage but lower health, and that's going to probably die, like the Pillager, or do you put on something that's higher health and lower damage so that it might not die and you have a threat afterwards?
Of course, if you go with that change to try and balance it, you are opening up Protected to being busted with it, where the trade on damage happens and it just shatters the Protected, and you still have this really beefed up guy. But I feel like if you've lined up getting a protected creature down, it's kept its Protected for the card resolving. I think that with all the costs on protected creatures, the closest you'd be able to do it with is like Master Tactician.
I think there's a way to deal with that, and that's just have it be that after the damage is done, then you just do the damage in turn, essentially, like sequentially.
Okay, I mean, yeah, that could work. They would have to finagle it, but I feel like the changes they've made might be enough for it here, but we'll see.
I mean, so it could almost be like mugging. You know how mugging like summons history guys? It could be that when you use Soul Survivor, it makes every creature attack that creature. Like it gives that creature the buff, right? Like the strength buff, and then you just like see every creature on the board just start swinging at that creature, including your own. Yeah. And that essentially does have the same effect, I believe. except with things like deadly, which might be an interesting interaction to consider anyway. But yeah, I mean, you would then you just basically then have it affect creatures in the typical order that it does on the playfield. So it would be enemy creatures left to right, and then your creatures left to right, I believe. And then in that case, it would deal with the protected issue because it would sort of work like mugging does now.
Yeah, I could see that working. Let's go. Let's go ahead and move on to the next card here. I didn't see this card really being oppressive. A lot of nature lists were cutting it already. Sudden Bloom. I know some lists were playing as a one of over the hunt, but I think some lists were just switching back to the hunt because there's a lot of versatility in being able to do 8 points of damage guaranteed versus having to trigger the Twin Strike Overkill, which is arguably probably the best part of the card, honestly, besides the stat boost. So Sudden Bloom is a nature spell. It is a 6 mana. 6 mana. Give a friendly creature +5/+5 if you're frenzied. Also give it Overkill and Twin Strike. And all they're really doing is knocking 1 point off the stats, making it a +4/+4. It's keeping the frenzied, Overkill, and Twin Strike. I don't think this nerf even really was worth touching the card. I feel like if they wanted to do anything to the card, they should have taken either Overkill or Twin Strike.
I actually think this is probably like I like this nerf in the sense that you're right in that I also did not think this card was like very oppressive, but there is a situation in which the card is really really annoying, and that's when you have one creature on the board. So like they have, I don't know, like a like one of those treant guys, like the 7/8 or whatever, and they attack with it and get frenzy, and then they just use that and then give it Overkill and Twin Strike and attack again to like another creature
Actually kill you, yeah, because you're taking
and that's
you're taking God knows how much, over 12 damage.
This reduces that damage by 1. I mean, because the thing is, it does have a random downside, and you can minimize that effect, which sort of made it really strong. But I think that having it be strong, if you do get the random effect, that's like, ideally you throw it out after you have attack with something else, and it gives it to something that you haven't attacked with.
I just feel like the difference between 4/4 and 5/5 is more of a win more. Like the creatures you're going to be playing this on, it's not going to make a big enough difference whether it's a 4/4 or 5/5 because you're in the nature domain, and all the nature creatures are huge, like the overgrown rhinos, the brazen moose. They're already large by nature. That wasn't supposed to be a pun, but we'll move on from that. And actually queuing up the Twin Strike is kind of the dangerous part of this card, or the Overkill, because like you were saying, you can give it to the giant, which that's rarely going to happen because I think they've cut the giant from a lot of the lists that you've been seeing. But if you did that, you hit their X4 or their X6, you eat that creature, they're going to still take like 7 damage, and then you're going to hit them again in the face for like 12 damage. So, I mean, that's 19 damage theoretically you can just randomly throw out that they weren't expecting. So I think that card, if they actually think it's a problem, will probably have to be seen again. But I don't think it's a problem. I really think that the card's fairly well balanced for 6 mana.
I think so as well. I mean, I think that this change basically just makes it a little bit weaker in the single creature situation where you trigger Frenzy with that creature and then give it Twin Strike and Overkill and then attack something on the board.
Being random is a big shoehold.
It is.
It's a shoehorse to that plan. So
I mean, again though, like the idea though is like, let's say you have the Celestial Stag out, something that doesn't have Confused, and you just attack the enemy god and then give it to the +5/+5 for them. They're set slightly by 1 point of damage, which is can be pretty big actually, but it doesn't really nerf giving it to a random creature because, well, you need to for one, you're going to get the random aspect of that. So then it's harder to like aim it onto the creature you want it to be on. Um, it's uh, it's already very strong in that sense. I think this is a fine change. I mean, because in my experience, anytime someone put it on a random creature, it was usually less efficient than if they were trying to put it on a specific one because of things like confused or whatever.
Well, I mean, they didn't remove the random from it. It's still random, but like we all know how nature works. If they've got one creature, that random creature is the creature they want.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like if they're running something that can just do a decent deal of damage, like on the first hit, and trigger frenzy, and then you give it overkill and twin strike, and they attack a creature, and then just blows up your board and does an insane amount of damage to you. That's how I feel like it was used a lot, like just as sort of like this pseudo board wipe kind of thing.
Yeah, I think definitely that card's probably. I don't know why it's on their radar. Um, let's talk about Warmonger Smith. This is a change that kind of caught me off guard, but it's probably for the better. I've been talking with a couple people
Yeah,
in the GU Discord. They were a little upset. I mean, Skeleton Heavy is a 2/4. It's the same stat line as the Skeleton Heavy. You know, Skeleton Heavy gets tons of play.
It's a more efficient Skeleton
but then,
Heavy, not to mention it.
Yeah, Skeleton Heavy with upside gives you weapon +2.
Yeah, it's an upside that's hard to interact with. Like that's unless you're expecting him to do that and like have a relic in hand or whatever. It's essentially just 2 free damage. You could pretty much just change that to roar, do 2 damage to the enemy gone.
Yeah,
and it would be the same effect.
It's a little more situational though, because now I mean, it's always been if you didn't have a relic, he's just a skeleton.
Yeah, you can just play. Yeah, you can play him as a skeleton.
But now
that's
the change.
Good stat lines.
Now the changes give your relic +1 strength instead. So you've cut 1 strength off the relic, which I think this is fine because
I think that's fair for an epic card.
It prevents your Blade of 6 from coming down and moving an X5 out of the way. It kind of hurts your ability to get through Guild Enforcer a little bit. But all in all, I feel like it's not a drastic change that ruins the card for War or crashes the value of it. Another guy suggested, because the mechanic was important for moving past blockers, maybe have making it a 2/3 so it was in line with Minosian Infiltrator instead of Skeleton Heavy, and keeping the +2 strength for its next attack. And I kind of feel like that would have been a fair change.
I kind of like this more because one of the biggest issues I at least have with War at the moment is that they, for a god that is so centered around combat, fighting, etc., they don't seem to care at all about the board usually. They basically just, send like dudes in to just die, like it is just like suicide bombers, like the fucking orc elite or whatever, the Archangel, and hit you with Slayer and relics and whatnot to do a large portion of their damage. So having the ability to buff up like that source of damage makes it so that they have less of a means of being interacted with at all because of the lack of healing in the game. At least with the 2/4 that lands on the board, even if it's a little harder to kill than 2/3, you can still kill it and do something to it before it hits you. And that's, I think, why God Blitz is not like as prevalent in this game, because I think that people realize, the devs, and I thank them for this, that playing a creature and then immediately smacking the enemy god with it feels like, okay, well, what could I have done if my deck is like a control deck?
Because there's no so coming from a Magic background, I know you come from a Magic background as well. Haste in Magic feels a lot different than Blitz in this game, in the aspect of you have a interaction at instant speed you can do. In this game and in Hearthstone, you don't have those interactions. So situations like God Blitz always feel really disgusting to be on the receiving end because it's guaranteed damage that you couldn't do anything about.
You do. You just take the damage, it hurts, it sucks, and that's it feels like there's not a lot of counterplay, and really the counterplay for that kind of thing tends to be being able to defend yourself and stabilize afterwards. I mean, you can put down front lines and stuff, but I mean, really, that ends up being the same thing, because if you're using your turns to play front lines, I mean, you can think about, like a war player just dropping. What is magic missile launcher? Is that a 3/2 or is it a?
It's a 4/3, 4/2, I think, or 4/3.
Yeah, it's a 3/2.
3/2.
Yeah, I mean, but still, so like I guess most of their relics don't kill the Guild Enforcer in one hit, but it does enable it just to be set up for a kill with the 2/2 blitz creature or whatever. So it does sort of feel like you.
And I know we're not trying to balance around Guild Enforcer as like a card. We're just kind of using it as a bench, when we're discussing, because it's commonly used in like 80% of the decks out there because of how efficiently statted it is. I mean,
not just that.
The argument goes
6 health.
Yeah, the argument goes against any other 6 health. Like it's really it feels really disgusting, to have.
6 health is an important number. It dodges a lot of things.
It just feels really disgusting to randomly have your card killed because your opponent progressed their board state, and there was no interaction you could have done to change it.
Yeah, and I mean that's. I would say that
at 2 mana
is really why that's
at 2 mana is I guess would be, because if they do it at like 6 or 7, it's to be expected. Those cards are powerful, but at 2 mana, out of nowhere, your shield's bashing my X3 and killing it. I mean, it enabled getting through, Pyramid Warden pretty efficiently. Like you ran a 2x into it and then killed it.
It made the Enduring Shield an actual threat. That's it, like, because the Enduring Shield by itself, it does 1 damage, which is like nothing. And it made it actually able to clear things. But not only just that, this essentially shifts. Like, I would honestly be fine if they made it like I don't think they even need to do this. I think this card is still perfectly fine as they made it. But if they made it like a 2/5 with +1 attack, because it's just like being able to add damage to a means of damage that you just can't interact with in the form of the relic is just so strong. And that's really what, again, tends to be so frustrating about Warrior, because a lot of their damage, it's just they hit you with a relic, they use the Vicious Rend on you, they use Slayer, and none of these are creatures you could remove from the board. And as you said, there's no counter spells in this game, so you sort of either just have to heal up or kill them before they eventually kill you with things that you really have a hard time interacting with at all.
I mean, if you looked at Magic, Burn would get infinitely better with no way for your opponent to interact. Like, the ability to interact with your opponent at instant speed, makes Burn harder.
So I mean,
so when you're balancing in this game, you got to keep in mind that your opponent's got to have a say in what happens as well in the game, and the interactions of your opponent's going to take a ton of damage, and there's nothing they can do about it because your card just says they don't have that option. Is where they're trying to balance around.
Wasn't there a brief period of time where there were decks that were like just like lands and lightning bolts, maybe some draw?
Yeah, I mean, in Magic they've had a long history about stuff like that, but this game it's completely different. I mean, you don't have that instant interaction, so
yeah,
they do have to kind of balance for that fact that you don't. I mean, one of the developers comes from a Magic background, and he's got to acknowledge, not having that. So, what do you think about the Moonlight Charm? I've heard of this thing. I've heard of people saying that it's a nerf, and I've heard people say it's a buff. Moonlight Charm, for everybody. Moonlight Charm is... Why can't I... Oh, I typed it wrong. So Moonlight Charm is a 3-mana equipment for nature. Currently, it is a 1/3 at the end of your turn. If you're frenzied, get +2/+2 for your strongest creature and -1 durability to the relic. They're changing it so that it's a 0/3 with the ability give +2/+2 to your strongest creature and -1 to this relic. So you no longer can enable Frenzy with it, but at the same time, you have more kind of choice about when it fires off.
I think that not being able to enable frenzy with it is going to be um, the big change here, because that's one of the big issues that I think they're trying to resolve with this change to the next one is that often a nature player could say play Finian, then a Moonlight Charm, and just
Run away with
start
the
going
game?
ape shit. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
because like you'd have like those those apples out or whatever. You put down something, even if the Finian died, you just put something else out, and then start throwing the apples and things, attack the enemy god, and then all of a sudden you've got like an 8/8 on the board,
And the
like
Moonlight
real
Charm,
quick.
like, I don't know if you've ever seen a Marshwalker that's like a 3/6, but that card's terrifying when you give it
Yeah,
+2/+2 off this.
yeah. I mean, it's I like this change because I mean it means that not only will it not be able to go off the first turn lands because it's an ability. That's something important to think about as well because uh, since it's an ability, it won't go off if you're just frenzied at the end of the turn you play. You actually have to, you know, wait until the next turn and then you can give +2/+2 to the creature. So it's not just like you play this and then if you are, being frenzied, it just gives you straight +2/+2 with no counterplay. Like this potentially does nothing if you destroy it before it gets to actually go off. And as well, it doesn't have the ability to trigger frenzy, so that really helps for things like Sun Bloom. I mean that's another situation that was really bad to have happen to you. Like it felt really terrible. Like they just hit you with that 1/3 relic, um, and then play Sun Bloom, and then just murder you or whatever. Like it's because you're not really expecting someone to attack with this kind of relic, and having that additional usage on it just gave it a lot of utility for that, because then they could do that and then actually get both attacks with the +5/+5 from the Sunbloom. So it was definitely something that could result in a pretty nutty creature, especially since this also buffed up, a creature. You could end up with like the massive Voltron creature on board, and with the last durability, you attack Sunbloom, and then you have like a 15/15 with overkill and twin strike, and the game's over.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a nerf, but I think they were trying not to be heavy-handed with it. Which is, I think, if some people think it's a buff and others think it's a nerf, I think they did a great job.
I think that it gives a little bit more control to it, which is good.
Yeah, I think, and that's something that nature kind of struggles with, is it doesn't have full control over its cards usually.
Yeah.
Um, Giving them the ability to choose when they trigger it gives it a lot more importance.
Yeah, like because I mean, if you have, for example, a 2/2 on the board and then a broccoli, like a 1/4, you honestly want to give this to your broccoli because as a regen, it has really high health. Putting it on the 2/2 gives you a 4/4, which is something, but I mean, that's still vulnerable to things like Hunting Trap and a lot of other stuff. Which it's like you could like this still gives it to the strongest creature for sure, but you don't need to actually trigger frenzy to give it to that thing anymore. So like what you can do now is you can just play this, and instead of needing to have that 2/2 out to, or the 1/4 out to even just give it to that thing, you can just drop it and then give it to it immediately after it lands. That's something I just thought about, that you don't actually need a board to get an effect from this.
Yeah,
You can immediately play this as well. So it's just less snowbally, really.
less snowbally, but more reactive.
Yeah.
Like you can do more with it now than you could. I feel. So
Yeah, I agree.
all right. So this is where we're starting to get into the controversial nerfs. All right, Finian Fruit Bear. I've heard both ways. I played the card all weekend, last weekend, and the weekend before. It's a 2-mana legendary for nature. It's a
Yeah.
2/3. If you are frenzied, get an apple. The apple's a 1/1. When it dies, get +1/+1 to your strongest creature. My verdict on it is the card was hard to kill at 2 mana. And that means that you coined it out turn 1, and then you could go face with it. Very few decks could interact with it, and they kind of felt the same way, because here it is on the list. They're changing it to a 2/2 from a 2/3, keeping its effect and everything. They're just taking a point of health from it, which opens it up to Vanguard Axewoman and Tavern Brawler, and a couple other things you can do with it. Illuminate. What do you think about the card?
Pretty much exactly the same there. That it at the stat line it had, especially because it started to give itself more stats. It was one of those cards where it landed and it was like, oh shit, do I have a 3-drop, like a 3 damage removal now? And if I don't, can I kill him before he turns into like a 5/6? Because once he's at that point, they're just gonna give him nature or whatever fucking armor, and then he's gonna be even harder to kill. And that was really the issue with that card. It's still strong because they can still do that. You just have more spells that can kill it before it gets out of control. And the thing is, that's what they need to do for these legendaries. If they're going to be printing legendaries at like 2 costs, like Finian and Odie, if you make them really hard to kill or even just difficult to kill, and they give like this crazy snowball advantage that early in the game, then it can just be game over for someone else, and it can be really hard for them to deal with it. Like, we'll talk about Odie coming up, but he removed one of his defensive abilities because, well, I mean, he was really hard to kill as it was, and if you couldn't take him off the board, then the war player just started to get like, huge advantage, got out of control, and then the game is over. So it's like having legendaries that are that low cost, you need to make sure that they're easy to deal with, so that they don't just snowball out of control without much counterplay for many gods or whatever.
I actually heard two suggestions people had with Finian over the last 24 hours. One was a meme that was worth listening to just because it was hilarious to see and imagine what would happen to it, and the other was like an honest, like, this might be worth it looking into if the card just gets run over from here on out. The meme part was, let's just make it a 2/2 with backline. And my thought process on that is, it would be hilarious to watch happen for about 2 weeks before they finally decided it was broken. Because every time you're frenzied, you get the apple would be protecting the Finian. And then
that would be unbelievably broken.
It would be better than being a 2/3.
Yeah, I don't think they thought about that.
And then the other option, which was make it a 1/3 for 2 mana with the same effect. And I feel like at 2 mana, you're still running into the same problem. The third option was make it a 2/3 for 3 mana. And I just feel like, yeah, it could be played. Yeah, it's strong. But it's kind of violating the nature of the card. It's supposed to be a 2 mana threat, kind of, that you kind of put down and hope to gain advantage out of. And if your opponent can't answer it, you hope to run away with the game. But at least now there's more you can do with it.
Yeah, I'm fine with it as it is now, because having the same strength as it is health also opens it up to be hunting trapped, and some other cards that deal more. That extra health is pretty important, just due to the fact that there are a lot of cards that just do damage. Do damage just as a straight number.
I just feel like against Magic, you put this thing down on turn 1 for coin,
like, what do
and they really struggled to deal with it, because if they played anything at all, you just ran your apples in it and then ran the thing into face.
And you're and it's a little rough. You're right. That's then it starts getting bigger. They then have to deal with it with like a tracking bolt or something. If they don't have that immediately, then it's sort of out of control. So you basically give them like 1 or 2 turns to deal with it, and then game is over if they can't. And it's pretty early for a threat like that to be coming online, I think.
I think the real question for the nature players out here, I mean, this card was trending, God, this thing in the center of weekend ranked for the last 2 weekends, this card's trended up into $70. It nestled around 60 to 65, outside of the weekend. But every weekend, as more people picked up nature for the weekend ranked, they would go up. Do you think this card will recover to 65 before the set goes out of print? Or do you think that this card is kind of going to stabilize around 40, 45, or do you think it plummets?
Hmm. I think people are going to see that it's still a pretty strong card because it still has the same effect. It can just be removed by a few more things now, which I mean, again, which is sort of needed as it is. The card is just so hard to remove with the majority of the gods in the game. So doing this, I definitely think helps keep it a little bit in check, but it still has the same ridiculous snowball potential. So I think people still realize this card is strong.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I mean, I feel like at 2-3 it was too strong. 2-2 gives more interaction and more, counterplay. It kind of goes back to the Soul Survivor argument of, if my opponent got this thing online and this card advantage online, I can't really deal with it efficiently, or by the time I do deal with it, the board's gotten out of hand. So I think it definitely falls in line. What we discussed the same night that we were discussing the Finian Fruit Bear before they even released these notes was the Audi nerf, which is what we'll talk about here. So Audi Valkos Herald, it was a 3-2 for 3 backline protected. Whenever this creature attacks your god, reduce a random highest mana cost creature in your hand by 1. They just took the backline off of it. What is your thought on that card? Because that was also one of the higher cost in Divine Order in terms of legendaries. Do you think this card's still playable? You feel like this card is too heavy nerf for people? I personally, I feel like it's reasonable.
I think this is going to help because really what the backline did was it made it so that other decks, which should have a better time on the board versus 4, ended up actually having a worse time because if the Odie was out, they could just protect him, with the shield. They could put out, just blockers and stuff. And the thing is, because he has backline, you have to go through every other fuck stick with goddamn protected that he has in the field, the tactician, 32 would protect, whatever, before you can even attack the OD. So it was like, unless you had some means of just directly hitting him, like a removal spell or something like that. Like mugging was a fantastic one because that was a 1 spell means of killing Odie. If you were able to do that, then it could be pretty crazy. Or like if you weren't able to remove it, I mean, then it could get pretty crazy because they would just keep putting down some, stuff to block and then attack with Odie, keep reducing things in their hand and get more and more mana efficiency on you, especially in like the control list.
I feel like they could not have taken protected and left backline because the card would be unplayable then. Because there's too many things that do X2, damage in the format. And backline helps. You don't think it needs protected?
No, they left protected. I think.
No, I know. I'm saying if they took protected left backline.
Yeah, I think that won't work.
Yeah, I think that would have plummeted the price of your card and ruined it as a card. I mean, think of it this way: people play Raid Reveler as a 3-2 already protected, and it doesn't have an upside. What's so bad about playing a third Raid Reveler in your deck if you're already playing 2, and then he's got a plus side to him that advances your board state and makes your mana more efficient. It's just I don't see where it needed to have backline and protected. It just made it hard to interact with. I know there's a lot of concern of, backline and protected made it so it was a usable card. Sometimes it wasn't. I feel like if your opponent is using all their answers on your other creatures as is, they're not going to be using it on your Audi. And now they're going to use it on your Audi. Like they'll try to use their creatures on the Audi, but you can have more control over that by just shifting your game plan. Instead of going non-stop face, you can keep the board control. I mean, the game is designed. The game's designed more about board control for the creatures.
You're right. I mean, it just opens up more options for a board control deck like Light or Nature to actually try to build their board and kill Odie if he lands, instead of sort of putting him in this rough position where if the war player is able to play things that just block your stuff, then if you don't have any sort of direct removal, then you're just not going to be able to get to the OD ever because he's in the backline. Like being able to like hitting him with a removal spell is that hasn't changed in difficulty at all because backline doesn't prevent that. But this does mean that decks that don't have access to removal spells or flank, things like light, they'll actually be able to deal with OD on the board. They'll be able to send like an acolyte or two at them and then just deal with them that way. Because otherwise, killing the OD means you had to kill everything else first on the board for light, which was really, really bad.
What do you think about the Blight Bomb change?
They need to add some unconditional aspect to it. I think that making it only destroy things with 2 health or less is good. However, the problem is that that severely reduces the use case of the card, and that's compared to a card like Stone Skin Poison or Nightmare or Piercing Bolt, even like stuff like that. Like Piercing Bolt's a good example, I would say, because at the absolute worst, Piercing Bolt does 2 damage. At its best, it removes infinite numbers of armor. I think Blight Bomb should be a card like that, where essentially it's like, at the best, it kills an OD with 1 spell, But at worst, it needs to do something as well. Because currently, it just has a best there, but the thing is, they just essentially, remove 1 mana cost from the things it can be used on to get the best effect. So it's like, I can see this being a card that now gets stuck in hand a lot more. That you just don't have targets to use it on.
I agree entirely with that statement. Again, stuck in hand. I honestly don't know why it even ended up on this list. I never really felt like it was oppressive. The developer, like when we were talking with the developer in the balance channel on this card, their answer to us as to why it's on this list was they were trying to bring it in line with other gods' 1 mana removal. And my thought process on this is, death is supposed to be the domain of destruction and, all that jazz. I feel like dealing straight up killing something that was 3 health or less wasn't oppressive. I mean, it helped you against the early decks, helped you against war, but at the same time, like you said, there are certain matchups where it just sat there and is a dead card.
Yeah, and I think that's just going to be the current issue that you can use it for self combos and stuff. This at least stops the Eva combo, which is pretty good. The Evo combo being if you reverse, for example, a very strong play as board wiped out early in the game would be to play your Eva and then Blight Bomb her before they manage to get a creature with ward onto the field. Because if Eva dies and it triggers targeting the creature with ward, and Eva was on your side of the field, ward will block it. If Eva dies and turns something else into a zombie, and then he plays a creature with ward, like a Bright Mage, and then you kill the zombie, and the zombie is on his side of the field, because the effect is actually coming from his side of the field, ward won't block it, and it'll get transformed into a zombie.
I think it's like a hole with ward, though. I think effects should still be tied to gods, like the god who created the effect to begin with. But I mean, that's a mechanic thing. I can't go into like design choices on that. I definitely feel like they could have just added the clause of destroy an enemy creature, and balance the card. I just feel like health 3 or less and it being stuck in my hand if they don't have a health 3 or less was fairer than a 2 or less and still being stuck in my hand, you know?
I see. I don't like that either. Like, I don't like that if, giving it to only enemy creatures, because that almost makes it even more limited in a way, because it's like in certain matchups, the only time you'd be using Blight Bomb would be to self-sacrifice a creature. But I do think that there is a way to deal with this, and I think that we talked about this in balance a bit, but sort of similar to how Piercing Bolt and other removals that have like a conditional effect work. I think that it should have an unconditional one. Like I think something like destroy a creature would, or if target a creature, if it has 2 health or less, destroy it. Otherwise, give it burn +3 or something like that. I think that would be pretty fair. Or do 2 damage to it. Something like that would be a lot more fair, because that gives it essentially, it gives the card the power it has in the the death flavor initial things, and that it destroys stuff that can go past protected. But if the creature has more than 2 health, you can still use it on that creature and get some sort of effect, so it doesn't just get totally stuck in hand.
I can kind of see that going that way. Something sours me about it being the death and destruction domain, but yet it's not allowed to have the premier 1 mana, destruction spell. But I mean, you got to think
That's
that
still really
it
good.
stacks. You got to think though, it stacks up against Ancient Text, Form of Power, Illuminate. The prior two I mentioned, they're way better than Blight Bomb will ever be. Even destroy an X3. I mean, Ancient Text can give your god protected or creature protected. Form of Power hits the god for 1 and then 2, and people forget, comparing those things. Mage's spells scale with spell damage. Like those 1 mana spells, they can hit for like 4 or 5 damage if you've got enough spell power on your side of the table, and that's why I feel like the Blight Bomb change was kind of a stab into decks that really didn't need it. Because I mean, right now there's 2 death decks really running around, 3 technically, but one that only like one that consistently places in the top 40 for Mythic, and that's going to be the board wipe death deck. Which this doesn't really affect that deck a whole lot because
It does.
I mean, like you said, the Eva interaction. If they play
it also
the
makes
Eva,
it a lot harder to just very efficiently kill early drops. But I get what you're saying. I think that because this, I would honestly say Stone Skin Poison is probably the current best 1-drop removal in the game. Maybe that's just because I play Deception, but
I would agree with you that Stone Skin Poison probably is next to Ancient. I mean, if we're ignoring the fact that Ancient Text and Form of Power are scalable.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, but the thing is that Stone Skin, it gives Order, which is, it bypasses Ward. It lets you go past a creature, like essentially just ignore Frontline. It gives Burn to...
which also goes past Ward.
Yeah, it CCs them for, 1 of their attacking turns and 2 of your attacking turns. So it's a kind of crazy removal. And I mean, that's why I feel like it should do something if it's not, immediately destroying it, because, like, I mean, you're right. Like, that's eventually Stone Skin. The purpose of it is to either, like, to ignore it for a little bit, and then eventually destroy it, or just basically to do 2 damage in a single turn. Like, it's a 2 damage removal. If it has 2 health, it just dies at the end of that turn. So.
Well, eventually the Stone Skin Poison will kill it, even if you just let it sit. Yeah. You're just sitting it for a turn while damaging at the end of your opponent's turn. You can let it hit you the next turn, or you can sleep it and it'll die. Or you can bounce it to hand, because how burn works, it goes to your hand, it's still burning, they play it again, and in their turn it's taking the burn damage now. I feel like they were trying to do something else with Blight Bomb, but realized after putting it out that may not be serving the purpose they thought. I don't think that this Blight Bomb change is going to make it to live. Personally, I don't think it will.
I think they need to add something to it.
Yeah, they're gonna.
I really do.
They're gonna have to do
something.
Like
a little bit of a side thing. Like, if it doesn't destroy it, do something else. Would
like
help a lot.
Can't see any of these changes we've discussed so far that won't make it to live besides the Blight Bomb. And really because it hit so many death decks and hurt so many death decks that already were weak.
What do you think
Just
about like the targeted creature with two or less health, destroy it, otherwise reduce its health by two?
that could work, but I mean it still falls in line with, you're you're not scaling the damage at all in any way where the other
Yeah, but
premier
that
one
means
drops too.
you could open it up for like a death ritual or whatever. Like the two power.
That's true. I could see that. I definitely could see that because that would line up Death Ritual being a little bit better as well. Um, what do you feel about? Okay, so this next card, this next card was the one that they said suffered for black board wipe death sins. They said that the nibble nerf was an attempt to peg down that deck. So just a nibble was deal 1 damage to a friendly creature, heal your god for 7. They just took 2 health from it, so it's now deal 1 damage to a friendly god and heal your god for 5. It costs 1. Do you think that does anything? I feel like the oppressive part of this card that Board Wipe Death cared about was the deal 1 damage part.
I mean, not no, not really. Like I think that the very efficient heal is actually a big portion of why Board Death ran this card. Because so let's just go over the rest of what the card is. And I was doing this when I was looking at my deck, but it is a 2 mana card off the bat. So it is not 1 mana.
Oh, it's a 2 mana. My bad.
Yeah, for the effect, you'd think it would be.
Oh, 1 mana. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd think it would be 1 mana, but it's 2 mana. It does not draw a card. It does not destroy a creature. It only does 1 damage to it. So just going off that, it's more expensive than Fleshbind. Fleshbind draws a card. Fleshbind can potentially heal you for more, and it also destroys a creature straight up. So there are better combos that you can do, like for just healing. For example, you can use Fleshbind on a sarcophagus. That's instantly 6 healing, and it resurrects a random Anubian. And it draws you a card. So you can do that. Like the reason this is good for Board Wipe Death in particular is because it is another card that they can burn from hand that gives them very efficient healing. And it doesn't really require a creature with high health or anything to get an effect from. They can just put down, a scarab and then nibble it, and then boom, that's 2 cards for playing 2 cards and 7 health. That's like it just.
Well, not only that, but their hero power too. They hero power they kill it straight up, and then they get their extra life from the hero power. But I feel like it enabled degenerate plays like Siren, and then nibble your Siren, and then hero power your Siren to force the sleep effect.
There are other ways to do that, though. I mean,
there
you can
is
Siren Blight Bomb still. You can Siren Fleshbind.
Yeah,
there's other ways to do
it. I mean,
it.
my opinion is this is a Band-Aid, a poorly aimed Band-Aid for the deck. Granted, they are kind of restricted on what they can do.
I think it helps because, again, one of the reasons that
but you gotta
this deck was able to deal with like war and stuff like that, like faster decks, is because they had ramps, heals, and stalls.
Well,
reducing their heals will help a bit.
The thing I don't understand about this change, though, is if you step back and you look at the changes we've gone over so far as a whole, it doesn't really make sense because they've slowed the game down considerably by all the nerfs to war and the few nerfs to nature. So why do we need to worry about 2 life for them? I mean, it's marginal, I feel.
So I guess to put it in perspective, like I've seen lists running 2 portable fortresses, 2 fleshbinds, 2 nibbles, and 2 reaps. And the idea being that if you are versus something like face damage mage, those fleshbinds become 8 health heals. The nibbles are 7 health heals. Reaps are 4 health heals. You have such a ridiculous amount of HP to work with that like it's impossible to die from face damage. So, and that's definitely one of the weaker decks for Board Wipe Death because you're essentially feeding them their combo or whatever, and they can just pump all their direct damage spells into you, or play like, like a Scryer or something, and then play like 2 Illuminates into it to deal with. I mean, who's running on Illuminates at that rating? But point being that they can just burn the protected effect on themselves, so they can very easily clear their hand and then just acquire what they need to finish you in a single turn. And having that many heals versus that and like the war matchup is just, I mean, it just gives you so much time.
Well, I feel like this change to Nimble is going to make it so that they're more incentivized to run Fleshbind anyways, because it's going to draw them a card on top of it, and they're only sacrificing a little bit of health, but at the same time, the meta has slowed down. They're not going to be, they might not be 7, health behind, or 5 health behind. They may only, be a little bit down, and not really care about it, so they'll want the card more. So like
the meta slowing down will also hurt Borway Theft, though.
That's true. It will open up more control.
Allowing more control decks and Deception in general. Deception and Light both have relatively good matchups versus Borway Theft, just because of the core mechanics of being able to remove stuff like Burn and Sleep. Like I think if people ran the Cleansing more, that would be kind of crazy versus Borway Theft, because Cleansing reads remove Burn and Sleep from all creatures, set their base strength and health to, or set their health and strength to their base, and draw a card for 3. So it's like a Radiant Dawn that doesn't give stats. It actually debuffs if you had a buff on things, but it can remove the Sulfuric Rain. It cantrips, like it just draws you a card in general. If you play it versus a Hypocria, all of a sudden it's like a 0/1 Hypocria with Ward or whatever. It's just literally useless. Because it doesn't need to be targeted or anything. You just use it, and that affects all creatures. It is pretty good versus nature and all. I think that a card could see a lot more play than it does, and I think that the reason it doesn't is just because it's not really good versus war or anything else. It just basically is trying to hit the board real fast, because then it's sort of just a dead draw. But I think a tech card versus Borway Death, I think that it's a card that is capable of winning the game, almost. Not to mention that Light has like Obliterate, so they have means of actually removing the that which aches permanently, like in the Aching Disciples, which is a major means that Borway Death, at least the mill variant, avoids milling themselves out. I think that all these changes overall are going to nerf Borway Theft. I think that like if you think of it as the sum of the whole, more control decks, more like tricky decks and stuff like that aren't so linear, combined with less healing, is going to make it so that Borway Death is not as safe nearly.
I also think it's going to open up a lot more brewing, like people being able to brew their own deck and take it out into the Mythic meta is going to be a lot more viable with how much the format's going to slow down.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Before it was a matter of, did I own Demogorgons or did I not own Demogorgons? And if I didn't own Demogorgons, I couldn't play anything mid-range or control unless I was playing War.
You wouldn't beat the War matchup.
So as far as Board Wipe Death and the Nibble change, I don't think that they're going to care too much about the Nibble. Because they just have so much card selection they could play. I think the bigger overall change to take away from that is that the overall changes, if they all come in, are going to be more impactful than that Nibble. The last card on the nerf list, Giant Pangolin. I have been hearing free-to-play nature players, their poor screams and cries about it. I personally feel, so Giant Pangolin is a 6-mana, 6/4, Confused Blitz, Armor 2. I personally feel like...
What do you feel, Mr. Free-to-Play?
I feel like this card didn't even need to be on this list, but I feel like the changes they made to it was humorous at best. So obviously the change they made was kind of in line with the thought process that they kind of announced earlier in the week of they feel armor's a little too overpowered over 1, so they dropped it to armor 1. My point on this card is rarely did the armor 2 make a massive difference. Like, it made trading with X4s a lot better. Like, you had more of a creature left afterwards. But I feel like Giant Penguin's big purpose is to punch through for nature. It punches through Guild Enforcer, it punches through Pyramid Warden. Anything that had 6 toughness, it mowed it down and kept going. And I feel like it's still super playable at this stage. I don't think that
It's playable.
I don't think that it's nerfed to the point where you wouldn't be putting 2 in your nature deck.
Oh, for 2 for sure. Maybe. So here's my opinion on it. I'm going to come from the counter side here that the 2 armor was absolutely impactful in a lot of situations. That if you slam that into what is it? Have 3 health?
4 health.
4 health?
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. So that's if you slammed it into something that did 3 damage or whatever, that would take it down to
A 6/3.
Yeah, a 6/3 with 2 armor, which is then still very hard to remove. Now it takes it down to a 6/2, which is blight bombable now. So it wasn't blight bombable before. I mean, I guess it was, but with this change, it still is. So that they sort of moved that in line there. It is also killable by any other 2 damage removal, like piercing bolt. You can use to kill it. Then you can kill it with sleep easier now. Like if you use Stone Skin Poison, it actually at least does damage to it, and Sleep Dart will kill it that turn. Like the turn, the turn after, like it will take another 2 damage or another 3, which gets reduced to 2. It makes it a lot easier to kill, and I think that's important because almost like the Archangel Bruiser, it was a very powerful removal tool that also just stayed on the board after arriving, and it was kind of hard to remove, to be honest.
But let's note, if we counted at the face value of it punches through an X6, if it's a 6/6 creature, it's punching through that, you're gonna lose the Giant Penguin, versus a Hunt, which is the same cost, would have killed, if that's the only creature on the field, or there's 2 creatures and a total of 8 toughness, it would have killed both creatures. I feel like
that's not when the Penguin was amazing. The Penguin was if your opponent dropped a Demogorgon, you play the Penguin into it. And
oh yeah, definitely
slam down because it kills the Demogorgon, kept you with a very large threat on the board. They barely got any health back because of the way
still does
works.
though.
Like you only get 2.
Oh yeah, true. The armor, they're gonna get 1 more health back, but I mean, it still is a Demogorgon Slayer. It still comes down and kills it.
Then you can kill it with a 2 damage spell, because then it has 1 mana or 1 armor and 1 health left, as opposed to 2 armor and 2 health.
I mean, it seems like a fair nerf, if we're looking at that standpoint. I just didn't think that it really was oppressive. I felt like it was a good card. I didn't feel like it was oppressive. But I can understand, armor being OP over 1, that kind of thought process led them to here. And like you're saying, it does open up more interaction from your opponent. And there's never going to be a situation in this game's history where your opponent being able to interact more is unfun for both players. I mean, we see the problem with D-rankers, and you're not interacting with anyone, you're just killing them. So we already know what not interacting with your opponent is not fun. It's not a game. So interacting with your opponent here is definitely better. So I can get behind that, with that thought process.
Something to think about is that Blitz is already out of identity, I guess, for nature. It's sort of not entirely.
It's true. It's more war.
Nature does have Blitz creatures, but it is definitely more of a war ability. So something that has Blitz on nature should be a little bit it should be a little bit more conditional than something that's Blitz on war, I guess. And I think that this is a good solution for that, because having low health, high armor was, you'd think, oh yeah, you can just kill it with hunting trap or something, but like it just made it really hard to kill with a lot of other stuff. Like now this makes it more akin to the Archangel Bruiser, except that it's more for just like single target removal and doesn't have like the overkill, and it's more expensive. So, but it's still probably tankier. Like this is going to stay on the board more reliably than the new Archangel for sure. Um,
Yeah,
but
I
yeah,
can
man,
understand.
I think that this is it dies to more things now. Like it doesn't. Um,
I don't think it's any less played. I think it's played
yeah,
just
I
as
think
much.
I do think it's still played. It kills Guild Enforcer. It but now it's not going to just take one damage versus the Guild Enforcer. It's not
Yep.
going to be nearly as just healthy afterwards. Because that was what's kind of crazy. You slam into like a 3 damage front line or something, and it just basically does nothing to it. So or like a Pyramid Warden or something, it just literally does nothing to it.
I'm excited about the changes. That's where we're gonna go next. Alright, so we've gotten to the buffs, we've gotten to the nerfs. The nerfs are probably the hardest part for everybody. The changes. So one of the things that they kind of spoiled in the middle of the week, rather 2 days before dropping this, is they really want to focus heavily on making some of these underplayed cards played. The talismans all came to mind immediately, and so I just kind of figured the talismans had to be changed. I never really ever saw a single talisman get played. They were all pennies. But we'll just start at the top with Safeguard Incantation. So Safeguard Incantation currently reads draw a card, give a ward to each creature in your hand, which I thought the card was decent, but it just never saw play. Now it's draw a card, give ward, and protect a dear god. What do you think about that? It's a
Nerf.
2-drop.
Nerf.
You think it's a nerf?
Hard nerf. I like the protected to your god, but
It gives ward
the reason you run this card is not for the protection of your god. It's so that you can give ward to like your Monolith of Storms or your your Snowstorm Spire. I think Snowstorm Spire. Yeah, Snowstorm Spire already has ward maybe, but to your All-Seeing Spires, to anything that you don't want to just be like be targeted by removal.
I think that's why they ended up not playing it as much, is because all the things you would want to in Mage give it ward already had ward.
That's Monolith doesn't.
I mean that Monolith doesn't, but it has order.
And not to mention, if you give, like, you can run this to make the cost-reducing creatures more defendable. So, like, if you run Safeguard Incantation and you run something like Assistant Alchemist or Warp Engineer, like I really kind of like it with the Warp Engineer, because you use Safeguard Incantation that gives the Warp Engineer ward. You play the Warp Engineer, reduce something, and then give it Protect with Ancient Text. Then all of a sudden you have a 1/3 Shadow Scryer, like stat-wise in the field. Like if you play your Scepter, then it becomes pretty annoying to kill, even with like like a 2 damage spell or something, like, or burn 2. It's gonna take a while to kill it. And that's just really nice, because like it seems that really what Mage wants to be doing with that combo, at least, is give spell boost and order using the Scepter to something that is easy to defend, that already has ward protected, like the Scryer, and then just wombo off and kill them in one turn with a bunch of face damage spells after things have been buffed like crazy. So that, I think, that means you won't be able to do that anymore with Safeguard Incantation. Not to mention, ward is just crazy. Like, consider how strong ward is, and like all the things it blocks, and then how strong giving it to all the creatures in your hand is, like, especially if you're trying to protect those creatures on the field, just for whatever reason.
But the problem was, already for Mage, a lot of their stuff had ward. Like the 1/1 I think it's a 2-drop 1/1 protected ward. Every turn it foresees the beginning of your turn.
That's a 1-drop 1/1.
Oh, 1-drop. Even better, Shadow Scryer. So Shadow Scryer is a card that they would have. The Oni, the 1/4 ward Oni or whatever. That card already has ward and gives your other creatures ward and stuff. I just feel like
Fire doesn't have ward. And giving that card ward is pretty stupid.
Does.
It means they have to use 2 cards to remove it since you can't attack it either.
Well, the Snow Spire also gives you ward, which
That's true.
Is worth
and
discussing.
that doesn't have ward either. So
that's true.
So that gives it a means of protecting that.
But I think that their kind of thought process with Safeguard Incantation is to make it more protect. Because you got to think about the new design for it. The new design for it in a matchup like War, which War is one of your arguably your hardest matchups.
Yeah, you're right.
Mage.
It does block Slayer twice.
It blocks Slayer once at minimum, twice at best.
Yeah.
And it cantrips too. I mean, cantripping is powerful. Progressing your defenses is a viable strategy for control or mid-range.
You're not wrong. It is basically just a heal. I kind of wish that they kept the other one. Maybe not. Maybe it's not a nerf. I guess it is just a change. Just basically a different type of card. I think I'm good with this because otherwise the giving ward to each creature in your hand can be pretty obnoxious because
I think it's hard to balance in the future too. Right?
Yeah, it's just if they get something that is very powerful with ward and give it ward, then the Spire, it can be really, really hard to deal with. It can snowball out of control just because putting a powerful creature down that it demands removal, but then giving it the ability to avoid removal is just kind of crazy.
What do you think about the Enchanted Chariot rework?
I have no thoughts. I mean, it cantrips now, so and it tutors as well.
It tutors. It doesn't cantrip. It tutors.
Yeah, but they also changed the card cost from 1 to 4.
Oh, it does. No, it draws a structure. Okay. Yeah. So
it doesn't. It just draws one.
It was a 1 mana 2/1. Deal 1 damage to enemy creature was the roar. Now they're making it a 4 mana 3/3, which, but it now draws a structure from your deck. I feel like Monolith is a structure. That's a reliable way to get your legendary structures into your hand.
It's the Eldritch Demonologist, but
for mage, yeah. And I feel like that makes it playable.
Good change. It's a meh change, but it does help Structure Mage for sure, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. Structure Mage just wants card advantage, and that gives them card advantage.
You know what? I think that's actually a good change.
It might see play now. It definitely wasn't seeing play before, but I thought it was the 1-drop for mages for creatures is just it's so hard to compete with. There's just so many good 1-drops for mages and everything of their plans.
I think you're right. It just doesn't. It doesn't go to that slot. It just doesn't work there because you're right. They just have so many good 1-drops.
Okay, so the juicy one, the juicy talismans that I've been craving ever since I saw them. So the Twisting Talisman would be the first one here. They increased its mana, and then they changed its text. So now it was before a 1 mana 1/3 with flank. After you attack a creature with this relic, if the creature survives, swap the creature's strength and health. That was unplayable. There was no way you were playing it. Now it's a 0/2 change text from they're changing the text to have an ability of swap a creature's strength and health and give -1 durability to the relic. So it's got 2 uses. I feel like it can kill some portable fortresses, and it can make math a headache for a lot of aggressive decks. Maybe open up, killing things off. It's definitely the most lackluster of all the talisman changes, but
I disagree.
You think it's great?
I don't think it's great, but I think it has a pretty good use case.
Where would you put this in a deck?
Where would I put this in a deck? So this is like a weirdly threatening relic just to have out. So let me just give you some situations where I think this could be pretty useful. You need to kill a Pyramid Warden. You switch it to a 6/2 and slam a 2/2 into it. You need to kill something that is,
Marshwalker, things like that.
Yeah, Marshwalker, or so, like a very high health, low strength creature or whatever. You switch it and then use Orpheus Distraction on it. You need to kill. I guess that's enough for kill examples. I think what's going to see more play or be more viable is using on your own stuff, because this allows you to use it on anyone's creature, not just things you attack. So,
do you think Hidden Rush runs this?
I wonder what could run it, but I think that you could do something like well,
we know Sleep isn't going to run it.
Yeah, okay, here's something cool. Jinxblade Duelist. Right?
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Oh my.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Okay.
So you switch it so it gets to 4/6 or something. You switch into a 6/4, and then it keeps getting stronger. It turns into a 6/7. You switch it.
You also can use it to kind of flip your what's that 3/1 on your turn, 1/3 on their turn. The Duelist. You can use that to flip around if you need to be trading with things that they have coming in. Or if you need to poke down small things.
I don't think that's as useful, but I think if you...
It's just a use for it. I'm just trying to see. I think the Hidden Rush deck is the home for this then.
Here's another interesting one, I think. The Inconspicuous Carriage, right?
Oh god, yeah. Oh my goodness, I just realized. They're expecting...
They're not expecting you can kill it in a turn, right? You just have that alone in the board, they pass their turn, flip it, and then hit it with a 2-drop, and then... something like that,
Yep, if they leave too much
mana open. Or slam it into one of their, that has 2 strength, like their Pyramid Warden or whatever. Man. That wipes out their Pyramid Warden and punishes them for leaving the mana open.
I didn't think that angle on Twisting Talisman. See, I
mean, this is gonna be a weird one to utilize, but I think it has some uses for sure.
I've been looking at it
for the players to find what those uses are.
I've been looking at it this whole time, and I felt like it was the worst out of all the talismans, but now that you put it that way, it still might be the worst out of all the talisman changes, but it's still super playable. I definitely think it goes in the Hidden Rush deck. It doesn't go in the Sleep deck. The mid-range would be fighting slots to put it in. So I think Hidden Rush is the only one that would care about this card. If, in the current, meta that exists. Granted, there's going to be new archetypes that open up here. Blazing Talisman. So Blazing Talisman currently is a 3-drop nature relic for... It's a 1/3. The ability on it is give all enemy creatures burn +1 and give -1 durability to this relic. They are changing it to a 0/1 ability give all enemy creatures burn +1 and give -1 durability. Or sorry, they are changing it to after an enemy creature attacks your god, give it burn +1. Then when a creature with burn dies, give your creatures +1 regen. I want to note here that they didn't say when an enemy creature with burn dies. It says when a creature with burn dies. You know what card comes to mind for
Is this
this
a
deck?
nature card?
This is a nature relic.
No way.
This is yep. Do you know what card comes to mind?
Inflammable Imbecile?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
The Djinn as well too. Isn't there the one that also has burn 1 and gives burn 1 to a creature?
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm not familiar with the card off the top of my head.
It's a Genesis card, if I remember correctly. It gives burn +1 to an enemy creature, and it has burn 1 as well.
And it's not even giving your wild creatures +1 regen. It's giving your creatures straight up +1 regen. So, you play a blade. You can play
that's really
what's
good.
the Rabid Bear? You play a Rabid Bear, and you've got this on the field already. Your Imbecile will die about the same time your Rabid Bear comes out. Your Rabid Bear is a 3/4 with 1 regen. You have another creature die with to burn on the battlefield. That's +2 regen. Your Rabid Bear is just eating things as a 4/4 at that point. We're not even talking about, making your pangolin stronger or your overgrown rhino stronger. I think this card is very playable in a lot of nature decks. I don't know that the Big Beast nature
Yeah, I
deck
don't
will
think you're
want
running
this.
in more aggressive lists.
But I'll tell you who probably is a big fan of this card, and that's Regen Nature. Because it enables you to play non-regen creatures in the deck and then still get the plus regen. Also, you're capping out at Trial of the Hydra. It's going to be even better because you're passively giving regen, and its durability is irrelevant because they have to remove it. It's not it's not a situation where it's losing durability every time this happens.
I think this card alone could enable the control nature list. Like this, because this is essentially just a persistent, if you attack me, your creatures are going to start to die. Which is just nuts. But, God, that is crazy. I kind of wish they gave that Deception, but
I mean, the burn probably would fit better with Deception, but
yeah,
you can't get all the nice toys. You got counterfeit. So the Lightning Talisman. I actually saw someone talking about Lightning Talisman, saying the changes they listed need nerfed. The changes that they're proposing here are too strong. So Lightning Talisman, as is a 3-mana mage relic. It's a 1/3. After your god attacks a creature with this relic, give that creature at the end of your turn, deal 2 damage to a random friendly character. It wasn't playable because you had to hit them, and you only did 1 damage, and mage doesn't have a lot of ways to gain life back. So the current proposed change to it is after your god is damaged, deal 2 damage to the strongest enemy creature, 1 to the weakest creature, and give -1 to this relic. So it does 3 damage when you get hit, which I feel like is a little fairer than the spontaneous randomness of the Lightning Talisman because you can control it a lot more. What they were saying was OP about it is this is going to do 9 damage for 3 mana, and I don't think it's broken because it's broken up over 3 turns, and you can interact with it as the opponent by playing different creatures that kind of change where that damage is going to lie. But I feel like it's strong enough to kind of guard ramp as it's going. I mean, it's a cheap drop. They put it on, they keep ramping up. They're passively defending themselves at the cost of some life. I feel like it's a really strong talisman and relic in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very strong defensive relic. On one hand, I'm sad the meme. It's the stupidest thing because you literally have to rely on them having a front line that just can't attack or whatever. But they have a portable fortress or something. Man, is that funny?
Oh, because they're not attacking you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess if it's this random friendly creature, that could just hit the same creature.
Well, you got to think strongest and weakness in this game when they're grading it. Yeah. They're grading off the creature's strength. So, I mean, the 1 damage will always land on the portable fortress.
I mean, I like this one more because, well, I think that it doesn't guaranteed kill their big attackers, and it does provide some counterplay as far as how people attack into it. But yeah, it's going to do a good deal of damage. I don't think it's an unreasonable amount of damage, so it's still a 3-drop, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's fine. Dude, Lightning Strike... Goddamn nature players complain about everything. That Lightning Strike is 8 damage and gives burn for 3, alright?
I mean, that card's getting a buff in the CSR, but let's not tell people that.
I know, right?
I mean, I think that this is great because it'll open up a control list for mage that's not ramp, that's not spell damage. It'll open up a control list to actually have some way to interact, proactively. But the biggest contender that's going to like this card's probably going to be ramp, who doesn't want to be interacting while they get to their stage where they're going to start interacting.
I think this helps out ramp a lot.
So I think overall this change is really good. I think that this will make it to live, honestly, because I've only seen the one person complain about it being broke, and I couldn't really, I didn't really see anyone kind of joining up saying they felt it. So I fully expect that to make it in. And Raging Talisman, the Warrior Talisman.
So before we go on, one really nice thing
Oh.
about that talisman I really like, that lightning talisman, um, it can all trigger in a single turn. Like that, if they attack you with 3 creatures, it just, you get the full value of the card, and you also, you know, have another relic slot available. So it works well with Palace and Scepter of Artistry. Like I know some people might be thinking, oh, there's just too many relics for mage, salty play. But realistically, this is going to pop after like a turn or two, maybe even just like after that
That's
turn.
true. I hadn't considered that. You're not really gated that it only happens once a turn. It can happen multiple turns, or multiple times in a turn. I think it's really strong now. Then I definitely feel like it's got a home in some mage decks. So the Warrior Talisman change. I'm if we're saying the Deception one's not unplayable, then the Warrior one's got to be playable as well. But I feel like it was kind of contending with the Deception one being one of the 2 worst ones that they had changed. So prior it had been a 4 mana 1/4 relic for Warrior. After you attack an enemy creature with this relic, if it survives, give the creature at the start of your turn. Give an enemy creature +1 strength. Warrior just had so many relics that were way better. There was just no reason to run it. The change that they're gonna do is ability: give each creature +1 strength and deal 1 damage to them. Give -1 to this relic, and it's going from being a 1/4 to a 0/2, but its mana is dropping from 4 to 2. I think that's kind of powerful. The only thing that kind of gates it is that all of Warrior's creatures are really low toughness to begin with. Well, what do you think about that? Do you think this is like a mid-range Warrior card?
This is playing Armor War, I think.
Armor War.
Yeah, an Armor and Range War.
That has been an archetype that hasn't really been able to emerge.
I've seen people running like the Guild Enforcer or the, what is it, like Plate Felfer? Like there's a war card that's like a 3/1. No, when one of your creatures dies, it gets 1 armor. And I could see that being like a thing that basically they play things that are either fine dying to it, like they're fine cool killing it, or they their aim is basically just to keep hitting the like 1 armor thing, so that it just gives it +1 strength and with no downside. I mean, that's what Enraged Warrior does. Like when using that power, they just hit like the Guild Enforcer or whatever with it.
Well, this isn't exactly the Warrior power, because if you read it, it says each creature. That includes your opponents. So
yeah, but one doesn't care about their life.
Well, true, but the reason it comes to mind is, the zombie matchup was already something, that we were envisioning a slowed down war would maybe struggle with them being slowed down from the rest of the notes in this patch. But now they have an out to the zombies because, that relic single-handedly puts the zombie deck down.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. It is a little bit of a board clear. It's not super efficient, but
at the same time advancing your board state.
Yeah, exactly.
So it may be a little bit more on the aspect of mid-range wants this to either be an aggro card when it needs to be an aggro card, or a removal card, or like a mass removal card. I mean, Tracking Bolt sometimes gets used for its second mode of deal 1 to each creature. I don't see why this, would be any worse.
Yeah, I mean, well, usually when you use Tracking Bolt in that mode, you have damage buff out.
True.
Or spell boost, I mean.
My only concern with it is that it can also go the wrong direction of like they have a guild enforcer out, and now you're buffing the guild enforcer, so it's like a 5/5. That could feel disgusting, but it is an ability, so you get to choose when it happens. So you're probably not going to be doing it when that's the case. Glaring Talisman, the light version. So Glaring Talisman was a 4-mana 3/3. I actually felt like this one was the most playable out of all of them in their current stage. It said, after your god attacks a creature with this relic, give order +3 to that creature. And being that it dealt 3 damage and had 3 charges at 4 mana, I felt like it was reasonable. But Light just has so many other good relics to play, it just was hard to find a spot for this probably. Their proposed changes are they're dropping the mana to 2, they're changing it to a 0/3 to make it in line with the other talismans. And it's straight up just going to be after an enemy attacks your god, give order 3 to that creature and -1 durability to this relic. What are your thoughts on the Glaring Talisman?
I mean, just like the Lightning Talisman, durability can all, disappear in a single turn. It essentially removes 3 creatures from the next turn of combat.
Which we've seen how powerful that could be in the Sleep Deception deck.
Mm-hmm. And not to mention that it makes running Divine Judgment, I think, a little bit safer, like 2 of them, because then you can put that up as a defensive move, and then anything that attacks you, reactively remove it if that's what they're using to win the game.
Do you think this kind of pushes? Do you think this would be played over Rid of Law, or do you think you play them both together in like a mid-range order deck, or like an order control deck? You probably play both, right?
I think you play both. I think you do play both.
Because Rid of Law, after the order runs out on that card,
yeah, it's just useless.
Yeah, so then you can just trash it by playing your Glaring Talisman.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard some people when they first spoiled this yesterday, saying this kind of shuts down aggro decks in the aspect of like, you think you play this on turn 2, they're probably not gonna have 3 creatures burning it up, so it might buy you 2 turns of reprieve to advance your board state. But at the same time, I feel like you said, it can get all eaten up in 1 turn. But I think opening up Divine Judgment's going to make it Divine Judgment a much more powerful card. With this.
About it, they attack you with 3 creatures or whatever, like, then they did 9 damage that turn. The next turn, you basically just prevented 9 damage. Or more if they buffed them.
Yeah, it's definitely a solid change, I think. I mean, I personally felt like the existing Glaring Talisman was on the border of being playable, but at 4 mana it was just too difficult to get over that, especially when you're running Cudgels and you're running Sabers and all these other cards that helped your war matchup. And especially with the meta slowing down from all these changes, I think Glaring Talisman kind of puts it in line with the other ones. Okay, so Plague Talisman was previously a 4-mana 1/2 death relic. After you damage your creature with this relic, if this creature survives, transform it into a 1/1 zombie. They are now making it a ability on a 0/3 and changing the cost to 2. The ability is that it gives a creature deal 2 damage to both gods at the end of your turn, and then -1 to this relic. I'm really excited about this card because I feel like if you look through Death's Assortment, there's a lot of cards out there that deal X damage to both gods and a hero power that deals X to both gods. It's going to open up like a Suicide Zoo variant that, cares about your life total being less than 15 and your opponent's life total being 0.
Yeah, I can see that. Like,
there's a 1/4 1-drop in Death that does the same effect, and it has backline on it. So like,
yeah, the shrine or whatever.
And I'm fairly confident you can stack this effect, so it just triggers multiple times in a turn.
Yeah, I mean, of course, yeah.
So like, If you stick one of those and
Oh,
you
on
start,
like on the same creature. Maybe. I think so.
it
I mean,
would
I
it would have to be tested probably.
yeah.
But I mean, let's just assume that it can. You literally could stack 6 charges of this up, or sorry, 3 charges of this up on one that already has the charge already on it because of how the card's designed. So that one creature is doing 8 damage to both gods. You can then turn around and play like either a zombie kind of sub theme to the deck, where you're just playing a ton
I
of
think you just
1/1s.
you put this on the obelisk and it gets kind of nutty. It's
That
like
too. That's the other thing you play
like
in that deck.
it self triggers frenzy. I mean, it gives you a like a backer for the shrine if you like. It keeps summoning those backers to the shrines if you run
Necroceptor
those.
in the deck.
Gives you leech. Yeah, that's. I think that you're right. This is going to open up like Suicide Zoo. I think this is going to be a really strong deck after this changes.
It definitely, when you already figure Corpse Explosion already had the opportunity to do, 24 points of damage to someone, in an open board. Sure, it'll do less damage when you trigger it with only like 3 zombies in play or 4 zombies in play, but that'll jump, what, 12 damage when you've already been draining them for like another 21, 22 damage over the course of like 3 or 4 turns. Especially because you can do something along the line of like turn one the 1/4 back line, turn 2 obelisk with coin, and you're already frenzied, and then turn 3, you can play your plague talisman, or if they're not showing any kind of aggression on turn 2, you can play your plague talisman on turn 2. And then turn 3, play your obelisk, which is going to be frenzied. And it's just like you're going to keep stacking and stacking this overwhelming board to where they can't interact with you if they don't wipe. And it'll be fast, and it might. This talisman might be one of those talismans they have to watch out and see if it's going to be too OP.
Yeah, I do think that this one could be like it can become a new Slayer level of damage. At least it's symmetrical, but I mean still.
So the next
Can
change.
you imagine Avatar of Death with that? Like you put that
Oh,
out.
oh goodness. So the next change.
Strength of turn, God.
Oh god. Rolling Death. Or sorry, Rolling Thunder. Here I am with Death. We were just talking about Death. So Rolling Thunder. That was another card that they had nerfed. Apparently the nerf ended up being too heavy-handed. So now they're just redesigning the card. Originally it was a 7-mana spell that summoned 2 3/3 Thundercallers. And if you were frenzied, it summoned a third one. And then they dropped it to...
That fourth one, you mean, right?
What was it for?
I think. It might have just been a lower cost. I know that it was nerfed. I think it was like it summons 3, and then if you're friends, you summon 4 instead.
Yeah, they tried to fix it by dropping the mana cost by 1, and it still wasn't seeing play. I think it was an 8-drop. They dropped it to a 7. Still not seeing played. So now they're just changing it entirely to if you're to summon 2 3/3 Thundercallers. If you're frenzied, draw the strongest Viking in your deck and reduce its cost by 1. I've seen some people say that could be problematic with a specific Viking. I can't remember what her name is, but she's like a 9-drop or an 8-drop. It might be
Valka.
Valka. Yeah, Valka.
Yeah.
Some people were thinking that prospectively it might be a little busted with that, but I don't know. I just don't. I think War has way better stuff to be doing with its time at that mana cost.
I mean, if it's still a 7-drop, it's not gonna like that enables it to be played a turn earlier. But I mean, you're right. It's just more like pulling that. This might enable control more to be a little better actually, because like if you pull that, not only does it put a very big threat on the board, Valka is a board wipe essentially. Because when she enters, she does like 9 strength to or 9 damage to all enemy creatures. It's essentially, and I think also maybe to the enemy god. I think it might just be the creatures though, but she has like Twin Strike and Overkill, and She's pretty nuts. She's definitely a game-ending card to land if you can't just kill it immediately. And even if it does just land, it kills all of your board unless you're like huge. So it'll be strong. I mean, that's for sure. But at 7 costs, that's still a lot of mana. So especially for war.
Yeah, I think they might need to just take that card back to design and redo it entirely. I don't think that change is going to be enough to make it like busted or anything.
Because they do have to be frenzied to get that effect.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it does stack up. Like if you play that, and then you also have an Audi in play. But again, we're talking Control Wars, the one that'd probably be looking to play this, and
yeah,
they've just got too much going on already that they'd rather be doing it at 7. Righteous Apparition. It was a 4 mana 2/4? 4 mana 2/4 for light. Backline, give order 3 to an enemy creature. They just dropped it to give order 2. So order 2 versus order 3 means that the creature comes back up on their turn. Like you fog it for a turn and then it comes back up. I think this change is better because it's going to come back up on your turn, so you're just going to refresh it. Versus you being able, you could stack it up before was the thing.
Oh, Righteous Apparition. Yeah, it's order +2. Yeah, I mean that's probably better, I think, because it means that you can attack them on your turn if you'd like before putting it again. Like it has essentially the same functionality.
They just changed when the order comes off as well.
Yeah.
Ghost form text changed. Pick one. So ghost form was give order 10 to a creature in your hand, draw a card. Now they're giving it give order 2 to a creature and draw a card. I'm not seeing like a place where that's super relevant for mage because it is a mage card. It's just tough to say. Out of all the changes, it's pretty lackluster.
I mean,
it does let you interact.
It can sort of increase the.
It interacts versus doing it to something in your hand.
I mean, it's also a non-damage based removal.
True.
That goes through ward.
That's true. It does slow a creature down through ward. I just don't think that it's going to change it being played as much. I mean, Mage has got a lot of other tools that are in this patch that would better fill up those slots. Ring of the Siren change. So this is one of those like really dumpy epics you were sad to get in Divine Order. So I'm glad it's getting some kind of attention. Yeah. It had been give a creature order 1 and give -1 durability this relic, to now it's give order 2 and give -1 durability to this relic. And it got nerfed from a 0/4 to a 0/3. I think that at least now the order is relevant to like you can put it on your opponent and slow a creature down, like you said, through ward. But at the same time, like I don't think it needed a stat change from a 0/4 to a 0/3. It's not like it was oppressive.
Yeah, I mean, I guess technically it'd stop Polyhymnia for like returns. You use it to like activate the hollow or something like that, and it does protect it that turn. I think that might be its best use. That like
probably the Order Deception deck.
Yeah, like because if you put that on, for example, the Gorgon Siren, that might be the card for it. Or the like Gorgon Medusa card, the one that when it stops sleeping, it sleeps 2 random enemy creatures. If you put that on that, then it allows you to sleep 2 creatures each turn, as long as you can do that. Or like if you put on like a Shaka Acolyte or a Prison Escapee, you can do some other, goofy stuff with that.
Well, the problem with that is that giving order 2 instead of order 1 like it was prior is that it's going to come off on your opponent's end step. So your opponent's going to end their turn, it's going to come back to you, and then it would sleep, which you're going to pass turn, it's going to be...
Does it? No. Actually, that might be true, yeah.
Yeah, I think that it kind of, if it was going to be used for that stance, it needed to be Order 1. They should have changed it to a similar variant to the Hollow, where it's give Order 1 or give Order 2. Like, give Order 2 to a creature you don't control, or give Order 1 to a creature you control. Or something like that.
Yeah, it could be interesting.
Um,
I'm wondering what they would do with that to like keep it, the theme of it and have it be good. Just so situational, I feel.
and then the last change they've made is Magnetic Blast was a rules correction. Magnetic Blast can now target unarmored creatures. I had no idea it couldn't target unarmored creatures to begin with, because the card literally says deal X damage, where X is the armor, +1. So I just thought it would deal 1 damage to those creatures.
I mean, is it X+1 or?
It was, I'm pretty sure it was X+1. I'll pull it up. Remove all armor from a creature. Deal X+1 damage to each creature where X is the amount of armor removed. So I thought it was like deal 1 damage to each creature as is.
It might just be a bug fix.
Yeah, it is definitely a bug fix, but I just didn't realize that was a problem to begin with. But that's good that they got that fixed. Overall, with these changes, I think the meta is going to slow down, as we've said here numerous times. I think we're going to see a lot of emergent archetypes come out that previously didn't have like 1 or 2 cards that they needed to exist. I think mid-range has gotten a lot of power from some of these card changes. I don't suspect that there'll be anything oppressive. See, mid-range getting power boosts helps free-to-play players as much as aggro does, because you don't necessarily need super expensive cards to play mid-range. You get cards like Demogorgon in the mix, and you're already talking the game's going to go to late mana, versus you can play really effective front-end creatures for your aggro portion of your mid-range, and then just very impactful cards in your mid-range that'll enable you to get to like 7 and 8 drops, just so you can have like a kind of like a haymaker to drop down. Also giving you a lot of viability against control. So I think overall these changes are pretty solid. And
yeah, I like them.
The only one it really stood out to me, that I nitpick is the Blight Bomb and the Nimble and the Penguin. Those 3 changes I nitpick, but I after talking them out, I can kind of understand the development changes between them.
I mean, I think Blight Bomb needs something. I think Nimble's probably a fine change.
But thank you all for sitting here through all these balance updates with us. Let us know your opinions in the comments below. And as always, if you like this kind of content and want to see more of it, like and subscribe for more Gods Unchained content. Thank you.
Yeah, subscribe to Baba. He's the greatest. Woo!